Trying to be as gentle as I can. Good evening and welcome everybody to the City of Lake Forest Park City Council regular meeting for Thursday, April 23rd. I'd like to call this meeting to order and I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, everybody. Please be seated. I would entertain a motion for adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Yeah.
Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, it's adopted by unanimous consent. Thank you, Council. Moving on, we're going to go to public comments. The Council will not be accepting online public comments. Comments are limited to a 3-minute time limit. This is an opportunity for the public to address the City Council on any item within its purview or control. Oral public comments are only accepted in person to ensure the orderly conduct of the meeting. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Council members may not respond during public comments, but may ask staff to follow up if appropriate. Public comments may not be used to promote or oppose candidates for public office or ballot measures. The mayor or presiding officer may interrupt comments that violate these instructions are unrelated to the council's purview or control or otherwise hinder the orderly conduct of the meeting. Apologize, that's a little bit of change in our diction there. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate that, sir. Okay. We're going to start with, I'm sorry, is this Kenneth Tank? Yes, Kenneth, please. Apologies. It's a little hard to see up here. Please join us at the podium if you'd like to speak. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Kenneth Tank. I live at 3305 Northeast 182nd Street, Lake Forest Park, 98155. I celebrated my 85th birthday on April 8th. Now, I've lived in Washington State since 1967. My wife died of Alzheimer's November 10th, 2024, and she has lived in the same house in Lake Forest Park since 1966. In November 2022, a massive tree fell from across the street on our house and it caused over $429,000 worth of damage. We were out of the house for 10 months. But everything in my 3,100 square foot house was brought up to current code, including R50 insulation, anything, furnace, everything. When I moved here, we had a state sales tax on food that you purchased in the grocery store. But since 1979, that tax was removed by state initiative. Recently, the Seattle Times posted an article about the unfairness of a utility sales tax. It was compared to the sales tax that we have paid on food. Now, for years, I've qualified for the state senior property tax exemption. I have no problem with that at all. I'm a disabled veteran. I have a Lake Forest Park business license because I must work, and I also have a second job. Now, I've been told that I do not belong in Lake Forest Park because I don't have enough funds to qualify as a millionaire. I'm sorry to tell you that when I faithfully attend these voter things that we have here, I've been told the same thing by candidates that sit in elected positions. I don't qualify for senior rates on utilities because I'm eligible for a tax-free disabled veteran pay. And that does not appear in my income tax, but you people want it so that I can get some type of discount on my utilities. Now, I am anything but MAGA. I attend all the protests here in other areas. But I am learning that when one political party in any state for long periods of time, when they're in power for long periods of time, unintended corruption sets in. I don't have a state or federal pension. I have only lived primarily in blue states, but I have never seen a more regressive tax structure than in the state of Washington. I called the Department of Revenue and they told me each district tax sets their own regressive rates, which can add up to 21% of a sales utility tax. We have a totally broken system that only serves the wealthy in Lake Forest Park and in other areas. And I think a modification for people over a certain age would be helpful. Utilities on a 3,100 square foot house are huge. And I think you should do something to eliminate the sales tax utilities for older people who are not millionaires. And I am not a millionaire, but I know now that many people in this area are millionaires, and I am not one of them. My current taxes on my Republic services for the city of Lake Forest Park are $14.05. My current utilities for the city of Lake Forest Park sewer are $4.72 plus a utility tax for King County treatment of $12.53. My current utility taxes for the Lake Forest Park Water District are a total of $12. My utility tax on my Puget Sound Energy is $9.25, which is 6.93%. And this is a corrupt system. The Seattle Times says it compares exactly to what happened when people paid sales tax on food. And if you're not a millionaire, and some of you people here, I have talked to you about this, and I do not qualify for some of the things that you asked for because I have a tax-free disabled veteran benefit. I think this is a very discouraging time. And I know I've lived in 3 states that are primarily blue states, and I have never seen such corruption as far as the Department of Resources said you can do anything you want. You can raise them again. I would like, and I see people who are here and they know that I've presented this before. When I go to some of the meetings, I'm not permitted to talk. I don't have enough money. And I would ask that everybody's got a reason. Oh, no, you can get this there. You can get this. No, not when you have a disabled pension. I could give up my disabled pension that I deserve from the government.
Thank you, Mr. Tank. We appreciate your comments very much.
Do you do anything with these, or did they just pass?
Well, staff or the council will be responding to you for sure. Thank you for your comments. Kathy Kernan. Welcome, Kathy.
Kernan, I've taught with her for years. Como.
I said
Kathy Kernan taught math.
Sorry.
I taught art. Oh.
It's in the mountains still. Apologies.
She's a friend.
Ms. Como.
I'm here to speak similarly to Kenna about change. We are Lake Forest Park. We are not Bothell. We are not Shoreline. We are not Kirkland. We are Lake Forest Park. We are a tight, good community. I just heard from the police how they like us. We have high standards. And when I think of Lake Forest Park, first, what do you guys think of when you think of Lake Forest Park? Just think in your mind, what is Lake Forest Park? To me, I think of books and reading and thinking and tall trees. I'd never seen such a tall tree till I moved out here. And the lake. And a quiet, almost village. We're never going to be a village anymore. But we're not there, or we're changing. I've seen change from the train park, where it was just a pile of dirt with old pads for where was it, the Army pads? I don't know, for the Nike site. It was a Nike site originally. And now we've got the train. I used to go up in the park when we first built our house 42 years ago, or maybe longer than that. It was teacher built. And now there during COVID, I had to wait to get in line on the path because there were so many people going up to the park. It's a big deal. But how do we save Lake Forest Park and not get to be too much of a big deal? I ask that you all look at that, think about that. What is Lake Forest Park to you? What does it do? How do we maintain the integrity that we have? And I think that adding businesses that on the corners, adding stuff that we may not need is not the way to do it. And there are lots of little shops here that in the mall that are out of business. So we need to protect what we are with thoughtful integrity. And that's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Memo. Appreciate it. And apologies for Miss.
Oh, I like
I don't know, Deputy Mayor. It's a little.
It's fair.
You're fine. But yes, my father was a professor and his handwriting was much worse than yours, Kathy. Sarah Phillips, welcome, Sarah. Sarah, if you want to join us, please. So making sure people have checked they want to speak. Okay. And Sally Yamazaki as well. Welcome, Sally.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Sarah Phillips. I live in Lake Forest Park. I did want to just quickly say that we had a climate conversation on Saturday. We had about 40 folks come in and it was a very interesting and provocative conversation. And we'll have another one in a quarter. We're thinking about it being on wildfires and drought. We anticipate those will be for front and center in July. But I'm really here to talk to you today about the climate, about what am I here to do? Town hall. The group of organizations and individuals, the Rotary, the Lake Forest Park Stewardship, the Climate Hub, and a couple of individuals were interested in doing a town hall and have sort of organized it together. We have a date and we sent you a save the date. I was a little confused because I got a note that said you hadn't gotten an email that I sent, so I printed it out. How do I give things to the council?
Oh, I'm sorry.
So this is just a summary of what the town hall is the structure of the town hall. And our intention is that that the citizens get to hear from you in sort of two ways. What is it that you're passionate about as you look forward to your position on the council? And the second thing is, we know that you represent us on regional forums and in various other aspects, and we'd like to hear sort of what you do in that capacity. It might be a commission, it might be the Sound Cities Association, but people begin to talk about that, and that would be very short. We're going to have a moderator who's from out of town. And then we're going to have questions and answers, and we'll structure it the same way Representative Jayapal did, which was to have microphones on either side, and people can focus on questions. So to be an opportunity for people to ask questions and for you to hear in a forum that's a little different from this, so there's some conversation back. Our intention is that that we'll have a moderator who's experienced in it. I know that you'll all want to jump in and answer questions, and we will have the moderator sort of make it so that doesn't happen, because then there'd only be one question, right? So focus on who. But if you all want to add to that too, but the notion would be to get as many questions as possible. And it will begin, the actual forum begins at 7 o'clock. From 6:30 to 7, there's going to be sort of an open house. Some people are bringing the tabling, the sponsoring organizations are putting up a table and having a chance to talk. So I just wanted to make sure you had that. And my compadre has disappeared. Has been working on the publicity, and we passed out a sort of a handbill of what we're going to be doing. We're going to put those posters. We have them in a variety of formats, and sizes, and we're going to be beginning that distribution of the publicity. The reason I'm here talking is that I'm just the secretary of the committee that's sort of the organizations that are putting this together. And we're looking forward to it. We think it's a great opportunity to sort of have a conversation with you. So, Sally, did you want to add anything? Okay, just give me a second, just a little bit.
I just want to say, like Ken and Kathy and different people, this is an opportunity because like here, we just talk, right? And we just look at your faces and smile. That's kind of part of the reason why the community wanted to put this on, because it'll be an opportunity for us to actually not necessarily have a dialogue, but to be able to get to know you better and to know better what it is and to show how you are working for us or not, or whatever, we actually get to hear something rather than just speak our mind like this. So Ken and people, I hope you join us. And you guys will be joining us. And I think it's going to be a wonderful opportunity. It is going to be different from the League of Women Voters in the sense that it's going to be much more informal. So yeah, and you'll be getting more information from us to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Appreciate your time. That's all we have for signups. Yes. Please join us. You only need to state your name. You don't have to say your address or anything.
I don't have to say my address?
You do not, actually. That's the law is not
You all know me, don't
requiring
you?
that, but
Welcome, Gene.
you say where you
Even put it at the top of my little sheet, Jean Reed, when it comes.
Our friend Jean is here.
Good evening. And I recently spent a lot of time with the Yamaguchi RUE application. And it made me realize that there are a couple small things that I think our city might do to better protect ourselves. And as I went over the report, I was a little surprised to find that the tree inventory that was accepted had a date from about a year ago, but it was really just a cover letter that appended the same data that had been submitted from a site visit in July of 2020. Now, tree inventories, as I understand it, generally are only considered valid for 1 to 2 years. And our code is explicit in that it says we must follow best available science. So we should perhaps have some limitation like 1 or 2 years, but that's not spelled out in the code. And so perhaps it would be helpful when we're looking at critical areas to specify that the tree inventory should meet the standard guidelines or name a year. I don't know what the right specific words are, but unfortunately, this was a theme with this application, and the applicant's been at this for a long time. I know they spent a lot of money on it. They have a right to come be our neighbors. In general, wetlands inventories are accepted for not more than 5 years. And in fact, less than that if there's been a change in hydrology. And of course, we know that was a serious violation 2 doors up where someone rerouted the stream. And so the hydrology clearly has changed. But in any case, their wetland data was from February of 2020. So even that would exceed the 5-year rule. The geotech analysis was very, very explicit. Sorry, I was late because I was trying to print this, but my printer was too slow and I finally gave up. The geotech report said quite clearly on their report, this report shall not be relied upon after 24 months from issuance. And Pangeo should be notified, and further that non-compliance with any of these requirements, having just cited referring back to them, would release Pangeo from any liability resulting from any reliance on any of their data. Now, their report was much more than 2 years old. It was actually from 2022, January 2022. So if we accept that geotech report, I would assume the city takes on the liability for accepting that data if it turned out to not be accurate. And so again, having not just best available science cited, but perhaps something a little more specific than that in the code. This is most important right now because this is the first time we've had an applicant that's looking for offsite mitigation. Many municipalities have passed tighter restrictions for that, even though it's a new change in the law. We're really in uncharted territory for this. And I think it's very important to hold all applicants to a high bar, but especially the additional issue of offsite mitigation requiring applicants to follow the code. Look at the design, on-site mitigation, local mitigation before a last resort of remote mitigation in Renton. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Just need to check with the clerk. Matt, do you have everything they need? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to make public comment at this time who has not signed up? Okay, with that, we will close public comment. Thank you, everybody. And just because it's important, it's timely, about the community forum, we will be putting out some legal guardrails because this will be a public meeting, a council meeting. This hasn't happened before. Want to make sure that we all stay within our lane and don't step on anybody's toes. So just to let you know, we'll be working on that and looking forward to the conversation. It's gonna be great. Really a lot of fun. With that, we get to move on to some great proclamations. Tracy.
May I just ask a quick point of information about the
Yeah.
several of the commenters today had deeply personal and important questions that are the rules of public comment don't allow response from the dais. I wonder if there's a way that we could explore, not tonight, but at some point to loosen that, to give some opportunity when people do open up like that, that there can be some, that it not feel one way, which I imagine has to be hard for the people who come and open themselves up like that. Or if is that a legal limitation, or is that something that is within our power to explore more?
It can become very challenging, and it's actually out of respect to members of the community as well.
We don't want to speed.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. But I appreciate the sentiment, Councilman Rosano, and I think there's certainly an opportunity to have a conversation with the administration and council leadership about it. You bet. Thank you, because we do want to make sure that our friends are really considered. Yes.
On topic, I would just point out in the blurb that the mayor read, it does say that while council members won't be responding directly, we may ask staff to follow up. And I think there were several of the public comments that it would behoove staff to follow up to explain, provide some more details on, for instance, the RUE process and where that's going, or the low-income senior discount program. And so I would hope that staff do follow up with members of the public who had those sort of comments.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goldman. Absolutely, every expectation that will happen. But people's concerns will be addressed. Got us a little off topic here. Bringing it back to Deputy Mayor Furutani, National Volunteer Week.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is the National Volunteer Week proclamation. Whereas millions of American volunteers give their time to help others, contributing over 30 million volunteer hours per year, worth over 635 million. And whereas National Volunteer Week was established in 1974 and has grown exponentially each year with thousands of volunteer projects and special events scheduled through the week. And whereas the City of Lake Forest Park seeks to achieve strong community spirit through active civic participation. And whereas there are many dedicated volunteers who serve the city on the Planning Commission, Tree Board, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, Civil Service Commission, and Salary Commission, helping make Lake Forest Park a more desirable place to live. And whereas volunteers play an important role in determining the direction of the city now and in the future. And whereas during this week, we call on all community members and organizations to help us thank, celebrate, recognize the contribution of all volunteers. Now, therefore, the Mayor and City Council of the City of Lake Forest Park proclaim April 19th to 25th, 2026 as National Volunteer Week in Lake Forest Park as a time to celebrate our volunteers and recognize the crucial role played by volunteers in our community. And I'm really sorry that Jean took off and couldn't recognize the stewardship.
Oh, Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor Bertani. We are moving on to Councilmember Riddle is going to celebrate Earth Day and Arbor Day 2026.
Thank you, Mayor. Earth Day and Arbor Days. Whereas in 2026, Washington State celebrates Arbor Day on April 8th and Earth Day on April 22nd, and National Arbor Day is on April 24th. And whereas each day presents a time to recognize the importance of preserving our natural resources. And whereas the City of Lake Forest Park recognizes the benefits of its urban forests for improving air and water quality, combating climate change, and generally enhancing the quality of life. And whereas the City of Lake Forest Park is a designated tree city for the 24th year, and whereas the City of Lake Forest Park wants to reduce greenhouse gas emissions that contribute to climate change, and whereas we are all stewards of this earth and have a responsibility to preserve it for future generations. Now, therefore, the Mayor and the City Council of Lake Forest Park do hereby call upon all residents of Lake Forest Park to join in celebrating Arbor Day and Earth Day by preserving and enhancing our natural environment in Lake Forest Park.
Thank you, Councilmember. We have so many proclamations tonight. We're going to have one of them. If you would like to read it, it's Bike Everywhere Month. It is posted on our website. So you're going to read it? Got it. Go for it. Please.
I biked here today, so that's why I came in a little bit disheveled. But still figuring out the timing on it, but trying to practice what I preach.
Appreciate it.
Bike Everywhere Month. Whereas the bicycle is a healthy, convenient, affordable, enjoyable, and environmentally sound form of transportation and recreation. And whereas throughout the month of May, we celebrate biking and the freedom, the joy, and the well-being it imbues within us, as well as the power that more people riding bikes has in making life better for everyone. And whereas bicycling serves as essential transportation for many who do not or cannot drive, so they can access jobs, education, essential goods and services, transit, and recreation. And whereas throughout the month of May, there are many opportunities in the region to experience the joys of bicycling through group rides, races, commuting events, educational programs, charity events, and by simply getting out and going somewhere by bike. And whereas bicycling has been shown to improve people's health, well-being, and quality of life and reduce congestion on our streets and roads, and whereas bicycling access and safety are core components of our local transportation system, and whereas Washington Bikes, Cascade Bicycle Club, the League of American Bicyclists, schools, parks and recreation departments, police departments, public health districts, hospitals, businesses, and civic groups will be promoting bicycling during the month of May 2026. And whereas these groups are also promoting the use of the bicycle as both a means of transportation and recreation year-round to attract more visitors to enjoy our local parks and trail systems, as well as restaurants and retail establishments. And whereas these groups are also promoting greater public awareness of bicycle operation and safety education during Bike Month and year-round in an effort to reduce collisions, injuries, and fatalities, and improve health and safety for everyone on the road. Now, therefore, the Mayor and City Council of the City of Lake Forest Park do hereby proclaim May 2026 as Bike Everywhere Month and encourage all residents to join in this special observance.
Thank you, Councilmember. Appreciate that. It's actually a beautiful day for biking. And it's my pleasure to read this. I mean, recognizing May 3rd through 19th as Municipal Clerks Week, because we deeply appreciate our municipal clerk and his department. Does a fantastic job for us. Thank you, Mr. McLean. Professional Municipal Clerks Week. Whereas the Office of the Professional Municipal Clerk, a time-honored and vital part of local government, exists throughout the world. And whereas the Office of the Professional Municipal Clerk is the oldest among public servants, and whereas the Office of the Professional Municipal Clerk provides the professional link between the residents, the local governing bodies, and agencies of government at other levels, and whereas professional municipal clerks have pledged to be ever mindful of their neutrality and impartiality, rendering equal service to all. And whereas the professional municipal clerk serves as the information center on functions of local government and community. And whereas professional municipal clerks continually strive to improve the administration of the affairs of the office of the professional municipal clerk through participation in education programs, seminars, workshops, and the annual meetings of their state, provincial, county, and international professional organizations. And whereas it is most appropriate that we recognize the accomplishments of the Office of the Professional Municipal Clerk and recognize the vital services they perform and their exemplary dedication to the communities they represent. Now, therefore, the mayor and the city council of the city of Lake Forest Park do hereby proclaim May 3rd through 9th, 2026 as Professional Municipal Clerks Week and invite all residents to join in extending appreciation to our professional municipal clerks of the city of Lake Forest Park, signed this 23rd day of April 2026. We do deeply appreciate what you all do, Matt. Thank you very much. And with that, we're moving on to Vice Chair Goldman is going to recognize Affordable Housing Week.
Yes. Whereas all people should have access to safe, healthy, and affordable homes within communities that provide opportunity. And whereas the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development defines affordable housing as housing on which the occupant is paying no more than 30% of gross income for housing costs, including utilities. And whereas the Department of Commerce projects that by 2044, King County needs nearly 200,000 new housing units for households at or below 80% area median income. And whereas studies have found that each $100 increase in median rent results in a 15% increase in homelessness in metro areas and a 39% increase in homelessness in nearby suburbs and rural areas. And whereas the COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated many existing financial constraints for low and moderate income households. And whereas the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recognize safe, healthy, and affordable housing within communities of opportunity as key social determinants of health. And whereas everyone benefits from affordable housing, including the people who reside in these properties, their neighbors, businesses, employees, and the community as a whole. And whereas, united to raise public awareness, people, organizations, and communities throughout King County are participating in local Affordable Housing Week activities to elevate the critical need to create communities with ample affordable housing. And whereas the City of Lake Forest Park endorses the goals, objectives, and purposes of Affordable Housing Week, and in doing so, firmly recommits itself to ensuring that our community's recovery from the crises at hand is equitable, and that all people in Lake Forest Park live with dignity in safe, healthy, and affordable homes. Now, therefore, the Mayor and City Council of the City of Lake Forest Park do hereby proclaim May 18th through 22nd, 2026 as Affordable Housing Week.
Thank you, Council Member. Very important work. And with that, we are moving on to the highlight of the night. Chief Harden, welcome, sir. We have the Police Department 2025 Annual Report. Lots of good things to share with you.
Let me soak this in for a bit, being my last one.
Please do.
All right, it's the 14th time that I've done this. Building this annual report that you guys got and this presentation. So grab a glass of wine and just kick back and watch the show. So let's see. First, I am going to read this mission because I want to drive this home to everybody that hears this. Our mission is to develop and support a team of professionals who consistently seek and find innovative policing strategies to affirmatively promote, preserve, and deliver those quality services which enhance the security and safety in our community. To support this mission, we will work in strong partnership with the community. And I think we've done that to an excellent job. When Steve Sutton, the chief at the time, came on board, we built this mission, and it continues to remain to this day. And I think it's a great mission that continues. Somebody might pick up a different mission and change things up, but as long as it's in this vein, that's where we're at. Values. Our department values the sanctity of all life. We strive for the equal, equitable, and compassionate application of law enforcement services for all and the universal acceptance of all people. We endeavor for the highest level of training and diversity for our police staff and maintain partnerships within our community and local governments to provide urgently needed resources for those in need. And tonight you're going to see this presentation has all these elements built into them. So the agenda tonight is I'm going to talk myself about our staff, then we talk a little bit about safety, then I'm going to hand off the baton to Diego, our commander, Zanilla, and then I'm going to he's going to hand the baton off to our support services, Ross, our commander for support services, Ross Adams, and then I will jump back in, talk a little bit about community outreach in our future. So the first thing I want to do is just to kind of give a little bit of the makeup of the police department. I am so thrilled to where I'm standing today to see what I see right now. It's been a long haul the last few years, and in 25, we finally got to a part where I've been looking for symmetry in the patrol division. We have 16 officers in the patrol. You see the 4 different sergeants, and then the 3 are the 4 different crews with 3 officers on each. It's been a long haul to get those positions, and I am absolutely grateful to this council, past councils, past mayors, our community have all built to get to where we're at here. What you see is an organizational chart of 2 different divisions. You have the operations divisions on the left. We basically say that's the uniformed officers that Commander Zanilla is in charge of currently. And then we have our support services commander that is in charge of, and I say everything else, which everything else is a huge monumental degree of work to do. As you can see on the support side, you have investigations, which is 2 detectives. You have a support services officer. We have now a traffic support officer that we'll talk about in a little bit. And then we have a DV advocate. We have 2 police chaplains. And then we have our amazing record specialists that have decided to come join us tonight in the back. That is 25 full-time employees. One of them we have is an emergency manager with NEMCO that is under our umbrella, and then DV advocate, and then I also have the 2 chaplains that are volunteers. We also have a project manager. Eco was our project manager that's a volunteer, has done some fantastic work, especially in this last year. So we're going to talk a little bit about staffing changes in 2025. One thing I want to point out that's not on here is Officer Johnson moved into the traffic support officer role January 1st. It was real close to the beginning of the year. She has done an amazing job, and this is a position that we had no idea really how it was going to play out. And I keep throwing things at her, all traffic related, one thing after another, and she's just done a great job, and she's learned all throughout the year, and it just continues that momentum going into this year. We had retirements. We had 3 retirements. 2 of them were sergeants that have been around for a long time, 27 years with both of them. They're definitely my friends, have been with them this whole run. Sergeant Jason Becker and Sergeant Maurice Parrish, otherwise known as Red and Jay. And then Officer Benjamin, he came over from Duval. He was with us for about 3 years, and then he ended up getting to the point where he's retiring and then moved down to some very hot, sunny area of Arizona. And then we hired towards the end of the year 3 new hires: Officer Kelly Gregory, Officer Austin Goodwine, and Officer Chase Holmes. And they've been fantastic, and we'll get a little bit into that later. And then we promoted a couple people. We have Officer Benson and Officer Zaboter that were both promoted to those sergeant positions. So had a lot of little movement there. So I'm going to talk a little bit about challenges in 2025. So we had officers and sergeants on FMLA for newborns and other medical issues. We had new officers onboarding and extensive training that takes place. Several hires on the field training, an officer in the police academy. We had internal employee performance issues, which is not fun to talk about because it's a negative kind of thing, but we take care of our problems. And but this contributes to road time and coverage on the road. And 2 of those positions were terminated. We had retirements. We had 2 promotions from, like I said, the officers to sergeants. And then we've had lots of mandated state, local training requirements, new promotions and position assignments, which means different and more training. And all of this contributes to coverage on the road. So we've been struggling with that, but actually, I'll get to the but in a second. The next slide here talks about, okay, so you've got staffing issues and you've got open positions that we've been kind of running pretty much 2 to 3 open positions all year long in 2025. So in 2025, almost 300 police officer applications came in, 294, for both entry level and certified. And the certified are lateral or exceptional. An exceptional is somebody that's not past the 2-year mark, but they have the certification from the academy. Of those 294, 196 were eligible, meeting requirements for the position. Of those 196, 82 made it to the oral board process. Of those 82, 29 made it to the background process. And of those 29, 3 of them made it. That's 1% of that 300 applications. So you can see part of our struggle is this particular part here. So in spite of all of that, our city still remains a very safe place to live in Washington. We always are in that top 15, top 10. There's a lot of different websites that say you're this, you know, these are the safest places, but I'm going to cherry pick this one that said we were number 2. And so in 2026, we were the second safest place in Washington state, and we were first by population. So if the little graphs down there, if you do by our population, we were the safest city in Washington state. And that obviously contributes, I think, a majority to the way we police and the public safety that we do here. Obviously, it's other things living in this community and how we have pride in our the decisions that council makes and what our community is made up. And just like when we had citizen comments from Kathy of what do you want Lake Forest Park to look like? This is exactly it, is having a safe community. All right, so enough of me. We're going to have Commander Zanilla come up here and talk about actually the real core and meat of our police department. Diego, I'm going to leave this.
Yeah, love it. Thank you, Chief. Good evening, everybody. All right.
And don't touch it.
Yes. All right. So, thank you, Chief, for choosing the most goofiest pictures that you can find. So we'll go directly to the stats. So it was very busy year, busy 2025 for us. We had the 11,540 calls in 2025. Just to have a comparison with other departments in Washington state, our size, more or less, they don't have more than 9,000, 10,000 calls. So 11,000 is, it's a lot of calls. And in comparison with 2024, we had 20% more calls, and we were almost busy all the time. The busiest month were June, July, and December. And for the most part, the calls are spread throughout the day, early evening, and also a little bit in the late evening and night. So there's not a really just 3-4 hours when we have a lot of calls. The calls are spread throughout the day. Let's go to the next. The next slide shows basically how proactive our officers are actually, because if you can check this slide, you can see that we had more traffic stops in 2025, like 101%, more drug arrests, more DUI arrests. So it means that our officers go out there every day, they do traffic stops, they stop impaired drivers, they take drugs from our streets. And so I'm very proud of this, because despite the fact that we don't have fully staffed squads, they go out there and they make the city safer every day. So the stats show that. Let's go to property crime. So let's see how much property crime we had in 2025. So once again, it's very proactive work of our patrol officers. It was a very good year for the city because almost everything went down. Okay, all the property crimes went down. And the only thing that you can see went up is residential burglaries, but it went from 8 to 11. So not really a big jump, but and ID theft. ID theft and frauds are really strange because the police doesn't really do anything, not because we don't want to do it, it's just that it's impossible to do something preemptive. And I'll give you an example. Unfortunately, like last week, somebody got scammed for $30,000. She received a call. She thought it was the FBI. They said, go to the bank, take $30,000 and send $30,000 to this address. She thought it was the FBI. She did that. She lost $50,000. So we can't do too much to do that. Of course, there will be an investigation, but we can't do anything before that. Just so you know, also what we call violent crime went down. So assaults and rapes went down, rapes went down 57%, and assaults 19%. So like I said, a very, very, very good year for the city. Everything went down. Traffic collisions. You can see from the map on the right-hand side, the usual hotspots, right? Ballinger Way, Bothell Way. In this case, we had for 2025, 107 collisions, and the average for the last 5 years was 111, so more or less the same. But one thing that I wanted to let you know that in 2025, we have, like the chief said, Officer Johnson, the traffic support officer, who actually helped a lot because she was self-dispatching to these traffic collisions and helping patrol officers in clearing the roadway and speed up the process so we could have the flow of traffic going back. So she did an amazing job. She was very instrumental for the overall success of the traffic unit. Only thing that we saw an increase, and we don't know why, there was an increase of hit and runs and DUI related traffic accidents, and a little bit more of aggressive driving. So that's the reason why we try to be proactive, go out there and stop aggressive drivers or impaired drivers. And the next slide is about traffic tickets. You can see a huge difference from 2024 to 2025. The average for the last 4 years was 1,125, and for 2025 we had 2,251. So good work from by our officer, our traffic officer, our patrol officers. It was a combination between regular patrol and focused traffic enforcement. We listen to our community. When somebody calls, it's like, I think we have a problem there. We focus on that particular area, and the results are 2,251 tickets. So once again, proactive work really shows, with our stats. I love our cameras.
Commander,
Please.
maybe you're about to answer this. I was just going to clarify, those are all tickets, but not the traffic cameras.
Correct.
Yeah.
You're right, 100%. This is what this slide is about, traffic cameras. And the reason why I started saying that we love traffic cameras, because we don't have 10 officers every day be there and doing traffic control and traffic enforcement. So the cameras for us are like safety measures that are designed to reduce speeding, are designed to reduce collisions. So they are like a force multiplier for us. And, the 3 red cameras, you can see the stats. Actually, 2025 for the red light cameras went down, the number of tickets. Maybe people understand that if you're on Lake Forest Park and you don't stop with the red light, you're going to get a ticket. And so that helps a lot. And also the other cameras for where we have the cameras for the elementary schools. You can see 5,930 for the LFP elementary and 35,000 tickets for Brookside. So, of course, for the Brookside, it includes also the 24/7 speeding 25 miles per hour. That's the reason why the high number of tickets. So, like I said, force multipliers for us, very, very important tool to have. A couple of patrol stories. This one is kind of unusual because the mayor was with us. It was.
I'm still in therapy for this one, but
Well,
no.
it was. Yeah, he was with
Commander Adams was
Commander Adams.
extraordinary. Yeah.
We were doing our National Night Out event. So we were so happy. Everybody was working. All my office, our officers were out there interacting with the community, going to the parties and explaining what the police department was doing, asking questions. And all of a sudden we have a call. At first we thought it was the regular theft from Ross, but the security guard actually said that when he tried to stop the 2 suspects, one of them, the male suspect, implied that he had a gun. So now, of course, the level goes a little bit higher than the simple shoplifting. And we are all cops, and so we heard the call, and everybody said, okay, we need to stop this car that was fleeing from the scene. And Commander Adams was with the mayor, and they intercepted the car, the suspect car, and also one of our sergeants, Sergeant Benson, was right there. So the suspects, of course, didn't stop when we tried to attempt to make a traffic stop, and they took off. And we deployed Star Chase, which was successful, but the car took 145th westbound, eventually crashed. And it was kind of strange because the driver, after crashing, our Sergeant Benson tried to apprehend the guy, and he had the gun, and he actually pointed the gun toward Sergeant Benson. And thank God he didn't shoot. Same thing for the Sergeant Benson, didn't shoot the suspect. So it was a good outcome because we were able to catch the driver. And Sergeant Benson told me immediately, I was there, immediately said, hey, he had the gun, he pointed the gun, and eventually threw the gun toward a fence. So I checked the fence, and we found actually the gun that was used in that crime. It was a good outcome for everybody because we were able to arrest the suspect, the driver, because the passenger actually took off. We couldn't find her. But we recovered all the stolen items. Nobody got injured. The bad guy basically got charged with a bunch of crimes. So overall was a good patrol story. And I like the fact that the mayor was there because we went from a very happy event where everybody happy to a major incident where everybody jumps on the stuff. So it's police work. You can go from a barking dog to a stop.
Commander, if I may interject
Please.
really quickly. From start to finish, that process from the call out to the team to Commander Adams witnessing the suspect vehicle going by. At the same moment, we're speaking with Councilmember Good, actually. And everything from that to the end of the incident was by the book, totally safe, absolutely what this department exemplifies. It was the right way for everything to go, and it could have gotten really bad. There's no question about it. This suspect was not in a good place. So
thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And I have to just say that sitting there witnessing that from my perspective and from my desk, it's very compelling to. And I can't even express this, tell the story well enough to the community that this is what community policing and responsible policing is about. And hats off to Commander Adams and Officer Benson too, because Officer Benson was absolutely stoic through the whole thing. And kept his cool. So we thank you for that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Would you mind explaining just very briefly the Star Chase and
Sure.
how that helped you?
Yeah, so Star Chase is extremely valuable tool for us. So this device are sent by our cars, the patrol cars, and they attach to the suspect car, so we can slow down and follow the suspect car just on our computer, so we know where it's going and what it's doing without going 80 miles per hour and putting at risk, the people around us. And so it helps tremendously because after a while, also the suspect slows down. And so usually they try to escape, abandon the car, or at least we know where they are now without having, these incredible, dangerous pursuits that we see on TV. And we know how dangerous pursuits are. And are dangerous for everybody, for the officers, for this, the people who are around us, for the suspect too. I mean, we have to think about them too. So Star Chase is a fantastic tool that our officer can deploy and did deploy in the past with success. So yeah, we are lucky that the chief approved the Star Chase.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Second story, similar in a way that it was in summer in June 16. At first, we thought it was just a hit and run, and we didn't know it was a DUI. And so the victim called the police, said, somebody hit my car, please help me. And we had one of our officers pretty close. So she responded immediately. She was looking for the car and for the suspect car, and she found the suspect. Oh, maybe vice versa. The suspect car found her, because when the bad guy saw Officer Gowing, he just hit the gas and hit our car. So at that point, it was a pursuit because he took off, and we advise also our adjacent jurisdictions, our adjacent. We work well with the Shoreline, Kenmore, Bothell. We are on the same boat. We try to do the best. So Bothell PD actually helped us, because now we are chasing this person who did a hit and run and hit also a patrol vehicle. And once again, side chase was deployed. And also a sergeant from Bothell PD was able to use another device that everybody has, spike strips. So basically it inflates the tires of the suspect vehicle. And that's what happened. Two tires got punctured, and the suspect kept going also on his rims, eventually crashed. We were able to apprehend the suspect with minimal use of force, besides just pulling him from the car. And he was taken to custody, and he was clearly impaired. So we completed a search warrant, was executed, and also in this case, the guy was booked, charged with DUI, eluding, assault. So he went to jail for a while with no injuries basically for anybody. So another successful story, patrol story. One of my favorite subjects, canine. I love dogs. So for me to have Bella with us is fantastic, because like I said, I love dogs. So to have a Malinois among us is fantastic. It was actually purchased. Bella was purchased in 2024, but she became fully deployable. And she did that. She did a good job throughout 2025. She was deployed 12 times. Officer Coleman, George and Bella have a great relationship. They work really well together. They're relatively green because it takes time before a canine unit can be proficient, but they just hit the ground running. They seized a lot of dope in Lake Forest Park, but also outside. So some agencies have some suspicious activity with drug, probably drug involved, and they call us and say, hey, do you have a dog that can come and sniff and see if there is drugs? So for Lake Forest Park, Bella and George actually seized 54 grams of fentanyl, 9.2 grams of methamphetamine, 18 grams of heroin, 13 oxycodone pills, and other general drugs for approximately $5,000 street value of drugs. So we took that drugs from the streets and from the drug dealers. And that's just Lake Forest Park. But we also helped other departments, like I said. So outside, Bella and George were able to seize 157 grams of fentanyl and 23 pills, over 5 grams of methamphetamine, oxycodone, and other drugs for almost $10,000. So it was it's a success story for 2025, because between our city and also the other jurisdiction was amazing job for having a brand new dog and a brand new handler. So great program. Once again, thank you, Chief, for allowing us to have a canine. Easy for you because you were a canine, so we're pushing for this new, but it's fantastic. And it's fantastic also, the next program that I want to talk about, drone program. So of course we operate in full compliance with federal, state, local law, our policies, and so a lot of people ask me, when do you use a drone? In which incident, I mean, which occasions, which occurrences? Well, I can tell you what, we don't use a drone first, so we are on the same page. We don't use drones for general surveillance. We don't use drones for patrol. We don't use drones to check on a protest, a legal protest out there. We don't use drones for that. But we can use drones for everything else that needs aerial support, like search and rescue, or trying to find the suspect who is taking off from us and maybe is armed, or maybe like missing person or crime scene or collision scenes where we need to have a better idea of what's going on. So to have a drone up in the air is fantastic. Or also event like, I think the last one we had was the US Justice Sotomayor. She came here to present her book at the Third Place Books. So we worked very well with the feds, with her security detail. But one of the things was like, we need to know that nothing around the facility where she will be has anything suspicious. And so, of course, we can have patrol going around, but having a drone up there and see that there is no suspicious activity is fantastic. It's a tool that helps tremendously to keep everybody safe. Of course, Justice Sotomayor, but also the public who went there, the people who were not involved in that event. I mean, the traffic around, you can have this huge view, bird view of what's going on. So nothing surveillance, it's just to make sure that everybody's safe. So drones are great. And another great program is the RCR. So Regional Crisis Response. I have more than 2 decades of police experience. And if you had told me 20 years ago that we had social workers with us on patrol, I would have said 20 years ago, you're crazy. They're gonna get killed. Let's not do this. It's just a theoretical thing. I think that nowadays it would be crazy not to have a social worker with us because they are fantastic. These mental health professionals come with us and, they work without LFP, but they work with other cities because this is a combination of 5 cities that put together the efforts and said, okay, let's create something for our community. And so what happens if somebody is in crisis, the last thing that they want to see is me in uniform with a gun. The last person they want to see. So to have a specialized unit that comes, it de-escalates immediately that incident. And after that, they have tools and they provide some resources and they connect the person in crisis with the resources. And so, for example, last year, we called them 300 times, just in Lake Forest Park, 300 times in 2025. And now sometimes, well, not most of the time, but sometimes they're the same people. And so now we can have a file saying, why it's not working? What can we do a little bit more? Can we work with other entities around us? Because clearly arresting somebody because he stole a sandwich, it doesn't bring anything to the society, to the community, to the police department. So let's try to find the right source of anything that can help that person. But we are cops. We are not social workers. So having these amazing people with us is just make a big difference for the community. And in 2025, the RCR served 1,856 people, almost 200 people in just 1 year between Kirkland, Kenmore, us, both. I mean, it's a huge amount of people served by these people. So we love to have them and we work really well. They're super professional. We are very happy of this collaboration and I hope that will go forever because we need that. I think this is my last. Yes. So thank you very much. If you have questions about operations.
Colleagues, questions for commanders and all?
I was going to ask for those questions, but I wanted to point out 3 things in the presentation. Calls for service, we're at 11,540 for last year. And you'll notice that there was 9,000 going back to 2020. We all know what happened in 2020 and COVID and all those kind of things happened. But we did average from 2015 to 2019 was 12,000. So that was actually the average of where we're at now was prior to COVID. Those are the same, pretty much those same numbers. Second thing is in 2015 to 2019, we had an average of 90-ish to 80 burglaries a year. And when we got in 2019, we were at 76 and we got it all the way down to 37. And I don't remember exactly how many was on the total there, but it's really low. So over those years, it has gone from the average around 80 to 90 all the way down to in the 20s, which is very cool. Traffic collisions is another one that I wanted to point out. From in 2011 and prior to, we averaged around 112 to 115. Then the tolling happened, and then we shot up in 2012 to 150 is our average. And we did that average till about 2019, and then COVID happens, and then we were in the around 105-ish range for quite a few years. And we're at 107, I think was the average, or 107 for this last year.
Yeah.
So just keep in perspective when you look at these numbers, there is like a pre-COVID kind of thing and where it was before and where we are now. So now does anybody have any questions? Yes.
You were speaking about the collisions, and I was curious, looks like the heat map is pretty close to where the roundabout is coming in. And a lot of it looks like there was the big concentration right at 178th where it comes in. Are you anticipating that will change as the roundabout changes patterns sort of upstream?
Without question, putting in a roundabout is going to cause lots of collisions initially. This is going to be one of those things that's going to hurt initially because people are going to have to learn how to drive a roundabout. The community is not going to be used to a roundabout right away. And then eventually it will go lower and it will be a very good thing that it's in there and the collision rates will go down. Our main collision areas are 165th, 170th, and Bothell and Ballinger Way. That's where a majority of our collisions happen. You'll see the different spots throughout, but that's where a lot of our numbers come from.
Colleagues, other questions for Chief Harden or Commander Zanella?
I have another one. If no one else, I don't want to jump on anyone's toes, but
Councilmember, please.
you're speaking about the UAVs, and I think in the report it says that you had three uses in 2025. Is that, and then but you get weekly calls from other departments that for various reasons don't. You mentioned staffing. To what degree is staffing the issue there, and to what I mean?
So the main problem with our drone program during 2025 is the training. So we needed to get everybody trained up. And once you get trained up, then you have to do regular training. So you get used to, actually flying because you have to reach the 107 certification. That's a lot of studying, a little bit of flying, but it's mostly studying bookwork. That's not actually application that's happening. So they got to get trained up, and that was happening all throughout the year. But also we have weather issues, so that plays into it, and then staffing plays into it. Now we have a NEMCO partner where there's a lot of volunteers that have drone operators, so we're trying to meld them together so it's one big team. I would love to have Shoreline Fire part of that, and then this region would be awesome for any kind of help. I would love an officer to throw a drone up when there's a fire going on and calling out different areas of where now it's starting to spread and fire can get to those. But the bottom line is it's still in its infancy and we're going to get there, but we do get calls because I know, in fact, I think Sergeant Walker back here is the one that's really in charge of the drone program. Commander Zanilla Commander Adams oversees it, but he is our guy in all of this. So he can answer those questions if you wanted to. But it's about infancy and getting those calls. And I got to tell you, on a Friday, when I'm just at home, not doing any, or Saturday, when I'm not doing anything, and I get a text on my phone that says drone sense is operating right now, and I click the link and I'm watching the officers live doing a drone call where we had the one that I last saw, there was somebody that was going to jump off the roof of Woodland North, so kind of a suicide type thing. Well, how long does it take when you have 2 or maybe 3 officers working to go check out Woodland North apartments, look all over the place and on the roof? You throw a drone up within 20, 30 seconds, you know where everybody is on the roof in all the different areas. And within a couple minutes, I'm watching them zoom around all over Woodland North. And then that call's done. And now the resources go right back into going back on the road because they've cleared that area. So those are the kind of things that have happened, but it's mostly infancy.
And do you have a sense of how many more calls we might have for that in 2026 based on, having done those trainings and everything?
Almost every agency has a drone program. We're all kind of getting on board for this because of the force multiplier. Redmond does a DFR program. It is, there's not even a person that has to watch it. They can do it without a view and they go right to the calls. So it's becoming more and more commonplace and that force multiplier. To answer your question, once we know that our operators are all squared away, trained up, we get calls from NORCOM that say, hey, we're looking for a drone, and we know we have drone operators, but they're not available. So when you hear the probably once a month, or 12 times, that's because it's NORCOM saying we're looking for a drone operator. We just don't have one available, but we could have gone if we were ready to go. Am I hitting everything on the drone stuff? Is there anything? Okay. Because we live in the Northwest.
Vice Chair Golder.
Yes, thanks. I have a question about Racer. So I'm curious, do you have a broad sense for when a Racer crisis responder is part of the response? What fraction of the time the Racer person is self-assigning versus what fraction they're being invited by an LFP officer?
So you asked this question, I think, a long, long time ago, and it's a great question. And back then, it's kind of the same. It's hard to quantify because we don't know the future. So like when we go to a call and then they take over, it could have been the officer that was for another hour and a half trying to find resources or help calm and de-escalate things down, which we used to do. But now it's like, oh, we can pull away, we can go do our thing. Now they can take over. What I do know is we have 2 individuals in our city that both call the police or NORCOM a lot, like 300 or 400 times, I'm guessing, through maybe 15 times a day kind of thing. And that's something that the RCR folks have been trying to focus on. That's self-dispatching. That's taking care of a problem where officers aren't going to the call, they're getting that particular call. To give you a percentage, I just don't have that specific number. It's really hard to quantify. I think maybe our executive director, Brooke Butner, she'd be able to probably do a better job on answering this. But I got to tell you, you can't, just like Commander Zanella said, do not let this program go. And I know when it gets really hard with budgets, these are kind of the things that are looked at. Don't let this one go.
I can add to the mix. I've had to call 911 a couple of times about people with challenges, and completely agnostically, without the dispatch folks knowing who I was, describing the situation. Both times they have indicated to me, we'll dispatch an officer, but we probably need to get RCR in the background.
Perfect.
They're right on it. And that is the kind of, because the timing is so important. One of them was, I think, colleague, you heard me talk about this, somebody clearly having a crisis in the middle of Bothell Way, dancing, and it was, they were having a mental crisis and they needed support. And it was not a criminal activity. Right. It's an activity where they needed support. So
I'm never going to dismiss how awesome my officers are in handling all those kind of situations. It is an absolute essential that they have the mental health professional there. It has been tremendous help to them to pull away from scenes and do those kind of things. Any other questions?
Not a question, just some praise. It's really great to hear how supportive our police department is of Racer. That's not something you see in all jurisdictions. So the fact that we're so supportive, I think is it's a great positive for our department.
Absolutely. Started with Radar, and the group that we have back then just carries the torch, and I want to continue to do that. We got to move on to support services, but is there anything that was pressing on patrol operations?
Can I ask just to follow up on this same topic? I'll echo the same. It's so great, especially with what we're seeing, what Seattle is seeing with CARES and the challenges of integrating the police force and the behavioral response. And the fact that, I mean, we've had this for 8 years and so many people don't even know that it exists, which is a real shame. And so thank you for speaking up for it. I can't remember if I was talking to you or to Brooke or someone else about that, the dispatch's capacity to directly dispatch Racer. And it sounded like that might be something that NORCOM could work on, that they can't right now, but that might be something that was possible in the future. Is that, am I
So-
remembering right, or is my?
A little bit. So this is an evolution because just like Commander Zanilla gave the idea of, oh my goodness, I would never have a mental health professional on a call, on a police call, that kind of attitude, and has progressed. And to the point where when we first got RCR going, NORCOM was not a partner right away. We had to say, hey, what kind of protocols? How is this going to work with dispatch? And then they started getting on board and things got moving to that is where it's going to evolve to most likely. Because we have a particular call, this is getting in the weeds. We have a particular caller that's constantly calling. They get put into like a queue called a 6. Is that right? So they get put in there where we're not going to respond because we're wasting resources from the police officers. That's something that maybe we go, hey, RCR folks, can you take care of these particular 6 calls that are in there because that person needs help and we're just wasting our time. I know Sergeant Walker has been on a lot of these calls. I absolutely know he's been on them. Huh? Yeah, they called yesterday. So so eventually it's going to evolve where more and more people are doing this, more and more cheerleading happens, and it's going to be more commonplace. But it takes a little while to get there, but it's getting there. All right. I wanted to point out a few things and then we're going to move on. Commander Adams.
Good evening, everyone. And by the way, Councilmember Good, we will be stopping by your place first this year.
Okay.
Just in case, you never know.
Yeah, the window down. High five.
Yeah, sorry about that. Very brief stop. It's always interesting when the chief introduces the 2 divisions of the department. He says Commander Zanilla has operations and Commander Adams just has everything else. He's done the job and he's done the job. So it's absolutely true. It is an amazing group of people that all perform various tasks that support the Patrol Operations Division and the operations of this department. So I'm very honored for this to be now finishing up my 2nd year doing this. So looking forward to many more. Within the Support Services Division, we have our investigations unit, which as of May 1st will be staffed with 2 full-time detectives. Finally, it's the first time in quite a while we've done that. We have our records division staffed by 2 full-time employees here with us today. We have support officers. We have a support services officer who manages our property and evidence facility as well as facilitates court transports. We have also our traffic support officer. And let's see if we can get this going here. There we go. Traffic support officer Amanda Johnson, who joined us in that position in the beginning of 2025. And then we also, in this side of the house, we also manage training for all of the department, which is, as you can imagine, a pretty significant task, given the state mandates and also our internal training standards that we hold. So I want to start off with the records division. As I said, this is staffed by 2 full-time civilian records specialists, Kelly Vetters and Kelsey Altus back there. These 2 employees in this unit, this is really the information hub for the police department. Everything that is generated by officers and detectives flows through this department, this unit. They are primarily responsible for managing the day in and day out tasks of that unit and tracking, as it says here, various technical data. But really, what are those records tasks? As I said, they track all of the paperwork generated by detectives and patrol operations. They ensure that everything is accurate and correct and entered into our records management system appropriately and correctly. This includes all police reports, tickets, collision data, things of that nature. They also coordinate the paper flow with our courts and with with other agencies and prosecutors. They conduct regular audits and purging of our records according to the state records retention laws. They additionally are responsible for auditing our records, including conducting security audits. And this relates to the physical security of our records, the information that we access, and also the physical security of our department. One of the monumental tasks that they take on, and I actually have a lot of involvement in this, is handling public records requests. Oftentimes, this is from from defense attorneys of defendants that we contact, public entities that have interest in cases, and then also we respond to prosecutors and other legal entities. In 2025, I'm going to start with the number of public records requests, and that was 307. But what I really want to highlight is the number of hours that this unit spends handling this. This is more than 130 hours. Now, my job with public records request is more of the body-worn camera, DUI, BAC room type video. So I handle all the video requests. And I can say that the number of requests that they receive and how it correlates to body-worn camera requests, it is just going up and up. People demand transparency, and this police department, I will tell you, is willing to deliver on that. The record specialists also manage specific types of fingerprinting and licensing duties, and this includes concealed pistol licenses and entertainers licenses for the Deja Vu. At one point I do want to highlight here, it's on the right of the screen here. We do have a medication destruction bin that is managed through this unit as well. And while we collected slightly less than what was collected in 2024, we still collected 164 pounds of leftover medication that could be accessible to teens, children, family members with addiction issues. And so the fact that we are able to provide this is just fantastic. Next, I want to talk about our support services officer. And so as we've talked about, we actually do have technically two support officers. They serve different functions. I'll talk about both of them here. So last year actually the beginning of this year, excuse me, Detective Craig Teschlog retired. And we had an opening in the support services division for a support services officer. And thankfully, given his area of expertise in property and evidence and crime and whatnot, he was a shoo-in for this position. So using his ability to stay organized and help maintain our room, the property room that is, what we're looking to do now is he and I are working to really lower the number of items that we have in permanent storage. Unfortunately, before Teschlog took over, we had a vacancy in that position. So we had several months where I was doing my best to not only fulfill my every day-to-day obligations, but I also had the management responsibilities of that room. Now, Teschlog has come in, and we're working on purging numerous items from that room. Currently, we're looking at about 1,500 items that are in permanent storage. This includes over 160 firearms, tons of drugs, fentanyl, heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, etc. And we did destroy over 200 items in 2025. However, I would expect 2026 numbers when we see it next year, it's going to be quite a bit higher. This position also facilitates court transportation for defendants when they need to come from either Snohomish County Jail, Linwood Jail, or the King County Jail when they have court here in Lake Forest Park. In 2025, there were nearly 100 trips to the jail, or to these jails, to transport the defendants to court. It's a significant undertaking to not only manage a property and evidence facility, but that on at least 2 days of your work week, you are now facilitating transports. So kudos to him and anyone that has that position. Now, as I mentioned before, in 2025, we also added Traffic Support Officer Amanda Johnson. Most of you are familiar with her. One of her main functions is to manage the traffic camera coordination. This includes the approval of traffic citations, but also to coordinate with the vendor for technical support. And she also assists with targeted traffic enforcement projects throughout the city, works with various traffic groups, with city administration. And yeah, she's very key to our operations at this point. Talk about some investigations aspects here. So because of our schedule, because of staffing, because of promotions, because of retirements, we throughout the year really only had one full-time detective in the unit at various times. Now, we had 3 detectives in there. So Teshog was in there for a little while with overlap with now Sergeant Zaboter. He promoted from detective to sergeant. And then at the end of 2025, Officer Robles was appointed the detective position. He's doing a fantastic job. I am excited to bring some stories to you guys in 2026, but we're already doing some great things with some recent violent crime that we've had. So we'll bring you updates as time comes up, time goes by. But for 2025, what you'll see, this slide shows our case assignments. So this is generally when a patrol officer goes and takes an initial report from someone. Hey, something happened. I was robbed. My house was broken into, or something, much worse can happen to a person. We also, through this unit, coordinate our background investigations. So of the numbers that you're going to see here, a lot of them are down, but the ones that really make up that 20 case difference between 2024 and 2025 really are going to be our background investigations. We did a ton of those, trying to find good qualified applicants. We have the category of other cases there. This is a generic catch-all for those that are not specifically mentioned here. A lot of these, I went through all the cases. These are going to be primarily, harassment type cases and death investigations. Those primarily made up those. And when I say death investigations, I'm not talking death by homicide. We're talking natural deaths where maybe it's unattended by a physician. This is just officers respond. We need to make sure that it's done right. So we have a medical examiner response, and then our detectives follow up with a medical examiner to make sure that there was no foul play. You'll also see that there are a few drug cases we put together in 2025. And this is in large part due to Officer Coleman and K9 Bella. Towards the end of the year, we had a renewed effort towards drug law enforcement, and we are going to continue that effort into 2026 and beyond. Enforcement is just one of many ways to combat the drug issues in our community. And we find that for those that aren't going to voluntarily seek treatment, we can, through legal interventions, get them into treatment through the courts. This is a graphic just showing a basic breakdown of the case assignments. Again, you can see that other cases and backgrounds, and then our APS and CPS referrals just made up a big portion of that. The next slide, we'll talk about completed investigations, which this is the slide that makes me happy, right? I want to see investigators out there doing good work, putting together good cases. Again, you're going to see that backgrounds really made up a huge part of this jump. We in 2024 there were 12 completed backgrounds, where in 2025 we had 20 completed. Again, additional other cases, harassment, death investigations, etc. And then we also had a little spike in fraud related cases. And again, another graphic to show you how we closed these. The things we're looking for, it's important that our detectives, obviously we want to document a great thorough case, make sure that we file charges, go and arrest the bad guys, and advocate for our victims through quality investigations. It's also important that we don't try to push cases when there's not adequate probable cause. And it also defined exculpatory information to, if someone is not a suspect in a crime, we want to be able to prove that as well. So you'll see a couple of big chunks there, insufficient evidence, and then filed an arrest. That makes up the bulk of the closures that we see in our cases. All right, investigation story. This is always the fun stuff. I think in years past, I've always presented depressing cases, and hopefully this is a little more encouraging. So the title of this is Speed Kills. Thankfully, nobody was killed. Somebody could have been, though. And I wanted to share this because really the last couple of years, there's been a good push towards traffic safety, traffic enforcement, traffic education, and traffic engineering in the city. One of the functions that detectives have is also to support our patrol operations and traffic investigations divisions. In May of 2025, our patrol officers responded to a late night single vehicle collision. When they arrived, there was a massive debris field that spanned the length of a football field. This was on Ballinger Way. They found a subject with life-threatening injuries and another moderately injured person. And it was really unclear in talking to the people on scene what really happened. So the next morning I come in and one of my detectives, this was Detective Zaboter at the time, we get called out to this at first light. As soon as the sun is coming up, we want to go take a look at this and really see what happened. We briefed with the patrol officers and immediately launched into canvassing. And this is where some of the accident reconstruction aspects come into play. We start measuring skid marks on the street. We look at impact points. We look at where the vehicle came to a rest. And then we also look at damage on the vehicle. We did get some assistance from State Patrol. We had some of their detectives come out to assist us in really doing a diagram of the scene because they are just really the technical experts on this. During our canvass, though, which is where we go and talk to neighbors, look for witnesses, look for video evidence, look for any evidence that may have come out from a vehicle. What we found was a really great video of the termination of the travel of that vehicle where it came to a stop. Got to see the occupants, got to see the driver come out of the car. What we learned throughout this investigation was that a person who was under the age of 21 with a souped up car out joyriding with some friends. And I have to tack on this. This person, this owner of this vehicle, removed safety restraints from the vehicle just to make his car faster. Took out airbags to make his car faster, to reduce weight. He ended up, we estimated that the minimum speed of that car was about 70 miles an hour. Top end was going to be about 100 miles an hour. This is at Ballinger on 190th. He left the road so violently. You can see that middle photograph up there. That's the back window of that car. That was blown out because he ejected one of his passengers through that window. Now, that victim of that crime has life-altering injuries and will forever. Where this is a positive story for me is that some of his passengers are great young men who are going on and learning lessons from this to be positive, high-functioning people in society with interest in working in government and being accomplished professionals, educated, and making better choices. Bad things happen, yes, but the victim in this he's taken care of as best he can. The suspect, as I will call him, by the way, this case has been adjudicated, which is why we're talking about it right now. The suspect is held accountable for his actions and will hopefully go on to never do this again. And this is something where we can actually use this case to educate young people in the city to not make these modifications, to make sure restraints are still intact and make sure your airbags are there. So this is one of those vehicles that, you know, you would see parked at a high school to say, hey, on prom night, please don't go out and do this. But it was a good case to put together. The detective did a fantastic job. Patrol officers did a great job. And the fact that both units were able to work so well together, so quickly to put together this case and gather all of the evidence, it was really just a great accomplishment for the department and for the officers. And with that, I'm going to give it back to Chief Harden. Thank you for your time. And again, National Night Out. We're doing it, Chief.
You bet.
Does anybody have any questions on?
I'm driving next time though.
Yeah.
Sorry, were there any questions regarding that?
Colleagues, questions for Commander Wright? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I'm just looking at these graphs. One of them says 5% exceptional. What does that mean? What's that designation?
Exceptional closures.
Yeah, exceptional closures can mean a few things. There were just exceptional circumstances to why those were not closed. One of the common ones that we come across is that a suspect may be deceased, actually. So that is just one example of that. But it means that the case cannot be closed with charges being filed.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues, any other questions for Commander Potts? Commander Adams, excuse me, using your first name. I
Thank you, sir. I
apologize.
appreciate it. All right. Thank you
Chief
very
Harden,
much.
thank you so much, Commander.
All right, so we're gonna wrap up with community and future. That picture right there is when I got sworn in by Dennis Peterson down in the bottom left corner. So young looking there. All right, so first thing is I want to go over a couple things that happened in 2025. First is the Police Explorer program. What had happened is Shoreline got a new chief, Tommy Collins, and Tommy, or Chief Collins, was a major, I believe, in the Maple Valley area. He developed one of the most robust Police Explorer programs, 30, 40 kids, part of this program, did an amazing job. So when he first came over to Shoreline, I wanted to meet him and his command staff brought Diego and Ross, but one of them couldn't make it there. But we had a meeting and he was talking about the police explorers that he wanted to do it. And I said, I want to do this. I was a police explorer when I was about 12, 13, 14 years old. And it's an amazing program. Can we partner with it? Absolutely. So I asked the department who's interested in being a police explorer advisor. And two people shot right away, Frankie Montague, Officer Montague, our SWAT operator, and Sergeant Benson, both of them being explorers. Both of them know the program, very fired up. So we got them connected up with Shoreline and they just took it from there. And what has happened is we've got this Police Explorer program that is going on with kids from Shoreline High School or Shorecrest High School and the other high school, Blanket, Shorewood. So that, and basically any of our kids that are in this, that are going to those schools can go into this program. And what it does is it gives you really good insight in what it is to be a police officer. Our program is not where I would like it to be. Eventually down the road, it'll be really neat to see some police explorers, cadets walking around, helping out with incidents like, or events like the 5K that's coming up. And we say, hey, let's go out there and have some fun. But they learn a lot. These are some range photos where they were learning how to fire firearms. Really good community aspect to it. A lot of them go to National Night Out and those kind of programs. Really cool. So that was developed in 2025 and hopefully will get bigger and bigger as time goes on. Second thing is the police academy, the community police academy. I know we have one particular, actually three people in this room on this dais that have been through this program. It was our inaugural. I was like, I really want to do a police or community police academy. So I'm telling this to Diego and Diego's like, I've done this. I know how to do it. I want to do it, and was fired up. And then boom, he developed this program. He gathered what he needed from other agencies as examples and then made it Lake Forest Park. We had lots of people that contributed officer wise. And so both these commanders definitely did a fantastic job. Thank you, Diego, for developing that. And then just bringing in officers. And there's some unexpected things that happen in this. We have Sergeant Gross that is a little bit more like on the lower end scale, not very extrovert. And he came in, just killed it with the DUI program. And it was fun to watch him light up because back in the day, that was his thing. He loved catching DUIs. And he just did an amazing job. So that program went off, first one. And so then we took a whole bunch of notes on how is it going to go in the second one. And we just had our second one. And you're going to know more about that at next year's annual report. But hopefully they continue this plan of doing 2 a year. So one early in the year and one later in the year. And the second one just got better. Sorry for those that you came, but it got even better. And I hope it continues to grow and get better. And so much so that the shoreline captain, Neil came over and attended every single event this year to bring back to shoreline because they want to do it in shoreline. So the talk is, do we kind of do a collaboration with them or do they do their own and we give them some help? Amazing, amazing, amazing community event there. And then this is what happened in 2025, okay? So a lot of stuff here. Shop with a Cop, and I'm going to stop on 3 of these. Shop with a Cop, it was our 11th year doing this. In the inception of Shop with a Cop, we have almost $50,000 worth of donations, 550 family members, and 131 kids have been served during this whole process. That program is amazing. You know how much I love that. Safety Day, this the 5th year. And this 5th year that we did, it started from the LFP bike rodeo at LFP Elementary, where we just kind of just walk, teach some kids how to ride their bikes in the parking lot to where it is today. The next one's July 11th here. And it's going to be even bigger where we have Public Works that's going to be part of it, doing an open house, touch a truck kind of thing. So this program has just grown every single year. And so being our 5th year in 2025, it went great. Thank you, Mayor. We always have we've had a dunk tank almost every year and both of us got dunked. And then let's see, National Night Out. It's the 19th year that we did it. We had 25 events this year. That's over 1,000 residents that we touched in our city. And when you look at that, that's quite a bit of people that we touch. And if you look over the 19 years, that's tens of thousands of residents that we have connected with. That's a huge community event that we've done. We also do the Polar Plunge with Rotary and Special Olympics and the Torch Run for Special Olympics, the department visitors that we have visit the station, blood donations, shoreline fire, pancake breakfast, preparedness fair, Halloween, the bike road. We still had a bike rodeo just at LFB Elementary that's still going on. And then Hope Stream partnership was something that we connected with the community. We had a forum and then we continued that partnership. We had large protest events out here. That's community and we're part of it. I was at that first one and then Diego's been to every single one of them since then, just hanging out, giving water, supporting our constitutional right to and for free speech and doing that kind of stuff. Police Explorers I talked about. We did lots of school functions and visits at our schools and the police academy. So that is a lot in a year. If you just look at that list, and I have another one too. The next thing I want to kind of go over is the foundation. The North Sound Police Foundation has been awesome. I saw that need when Officer Shoup was killed in the line of duty in Bothell, and it says we need to do something. Mill Creek had a great program going on, and I sat with them and said, let's get together and partner. And it has evolved into this North Sound Police Foundation where we have 5 different agencies, actually 7 different agencies, right? 6 different police agents or police cities that are part of this foundation. Issaquah and Mercer Island are the 2 newest. No, Medina and Issaquah are the 2 newest that are part of it. And it's amazing program. And just for Lake Forest Park, we've used over $200,000 in funds. That's stuff that I would try and plead and beg with the mayor and your budget and the city. And when we have our financial woes, and it's like, I want to do some really cool things like Star Chase and drones and radars and LiDARs and radios and like things that are all over the place that we just can't squeak it in the budget. Let's see if we can do it in a different way. And the community has been so awesome in that. And we have another one coming up, but that's going to be somebody else's fire with Blue Bridge, which is a really, really cool program and helping our community. And then, okay. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the future. You got me for another month or so, but really the city, the department needs to focus on that continued support for recruitment and retention. That is so important to keep good people here. I know it pains budgets for salary increases, and it's not helpful from the outside agencies of raising the salaries to try and stay competitive, but we do our best. Our council's done the best. Our budgets over the last 20 years have always done our best to keep what we got and just continue to do that. We want to find the best people that we can. You see how many people we had applications for. It was like 190 something that actually was started getting through. Well, we're picky. We want to make sure that we pick the right people. And when they go through a hardcore background process, because we want to have good quality people. And even when they get through it, sometimes they may get on the road and they're not good enough and we have to let them go. So it's a program that we want to keep the best people to serve our community. The robust traffic unit, we've done everything to this point. We get some e-bikes in there, this next administration, get that going. You have a really good traffic unit when we're all fully staffed. It's going to be awesome. We're going to have that reputation when I first got here about, hey, you drive down Bothell Way, you're going to get a ticket. It's just going to happen. The cops are out there, they're watching. And that's the kind of reputation we need for people to start slowing down more in here, because it's gotten a little speedy in some areas. And then the vehicle updates, that was a struggle, but we got through that. Now we have a plan. I hopefully keep that going, but that is definitely some of those things that hit the budget. We want to continue to focus on health and wellness. It's extremely important for this line of work, for our firefighters, our EMTs, our dispatchers, our nurses. This line of work has a lot of trauma and we need to keep our people healthy. My goal is to retire in this career healthy, and I am there. And I want everybody that is going to do this job to have that luxury. It's super important. So continue to do any gym upgrades that come up, continue to do health and wellness training, peer support. We now have a peer support group in our C-SPA agencies, which means that we have 12 agencies in our Small Cities Coalition that have put a handful of people from each agency in one big peer support group. That means when something tragic happens and we need to reach out to a peer support group, it's not like, hey, can we get a couple people in our agency to do it? We're getting a big group of people that know specifically how to deal with this that we can call in. So that's coming online. It was all during 25 when it was being built. And I think really it started rolling in the last couple months of the year, November, December. We have an entire budget set aside for this purpose. It's really, really cool. And then continuing that culture, I just want to keep that culture of everybody takes care of themselves physically and mentally. We need to stay down that road. Technology is always something I've been behind. I love software and hardware that makes our lives better. So continue that work down the road where you're developing things that make the officers' lives better and efficiencies and speed in doing things. You're going to have the Axon contract that's going to be coming up. That's a very expensive contract, but it's very important. So while you go through these budget processes, look at how this stuff melds so well with tasers, body-worn cameras, evidence.com software, all of these things that come up. They do get expensive, but it is well worth it for our community and our police department. Traffic motorcycle is going to come on board hopefully this year pretty soon. I think in June, the bike's supposed to arrive. So we'll get that going. E-bikes is a project that we've been wanting to do for quite a while. It's our capacity, again, of getting things done, sometimes get in the way. 3D training is pretty cool. That is definitely evolved. And at some point, hopefully you'll get some electric patrol vehicles. When we get that infrastructure going for our city and we can pull in some patrol cars in and get them charged up, and then we're going to have less dependency on fueling up. LPRs, we were kind of going down that track. It got derailed with a lot of political environment with flock and those kind of things. But I think our legislation has built in where the guardrails, and that's at the point now where we can start having that conversation if that is something that our city, our community, our council has an appetite for. And then I know down the road, we're going to end up adding more traffic cameras because they are so effective in this city. But remember the capacity for our agency. And I'm going to say it in a second, so I'll get there. And then just creative community events. Get me out of here and get somebody new in here that's going to have some really cool creative ideas that nobody's ever thought of. It's just really neat to say, hey, let's try this idea out. If it fails, great, then make it better, find better solutions, but some more community events. I know we do a lot, but this is so important for this job, for our community. So I want to wrap up a little bit of 2025 here. We had a lot of staffing challenges, continue to have those staffing challenges. We talked about multiple community engagements that we had throughout the year. We had 24/7 camera safety project. That started in 24 at the end of the year, went through a lot of speed bumps. But 2025 is where we were really hitting the core of that. So that was something that was overwhelming to us. It was something that was very good for our traffic support officer to take on, and then the other officers that are just getting all those tickets situated. But that was a big project. We had a big change in our city with speed. You guys changed the local roads to 20 miles an hour. So that was a change to us. We went through a public safety levy. That was a lot of work itself. We developed the K9 UAV, the cell phone forensic programs. So when I was doing my self-eval, I was writing down everything that went on in 2025. And this is not just me, this is my entire agency, but a lot of it was our command staff. But we did a preparedness fair, a safety forum. We dealt with sacred medicine down the street. We had Halloween. We did accreditation awards, or did our accreditation. ABLE training, Shop of the Cop, speed changes, rotary plunge, locker room upgrades happened at the beginning of 2025, which was a big project. Thank you so much, Rebecca and Katie, for helping getting that finally done. We had our bike rodeo, our safety day, Hope Stream, large protest events, the levy, shoreline pancake breakfast, building out the traffic units, the support officer building that out, our rotary auctions, or the rotary auction, which does have a component with our city, gym equipment, police explorers, culvert replacements, all the stuff that went on with traffic craziness, especially at 35th and Ballinger. All the stuff that we do with the schools, community policing academy, drone programs. We did Sallyport improvements. Rebecca helped out with that. We did a full clean out. My whole crew, we got a big, huge bin, and we finally cleaned out the Sallyport. And we got lights in there that I haven't seen in 20 years. It was amazingly better. National Night Out, we had Justice Sonia Sotomayor visit us, and then there's a list of like 20 different things we did with people. It was a lot of work in 2025, and we still somehow, I will never forget Philippa, one of our previous council members, Cassover. She's like, I don't know how you do it every year with all of this stuff. And every year I think about the same thing. I don't know how we do it. It's amazing that our crew and our staff does such a great job. So I'm giving ourselves already praise, and I know you guys feel this way, but it's amazing stuff that we've gone through. The last thing is just closing thoughts. Been here 25 years. I've loved this community, and it's pretty cool to close this out and wrap this up with everybody. I still got another month that I'm around, but I'm going to be handing the torch, the baton off to another group, and I've absolutely loved this. We'll have another discussion about this, but reflecting over this last year, it's just been the same thing of just awesome quality police work, public safety for your community. And I've enjoyed it. So last picture here. I did this last year with a different picture that had come from one particular school that had all the thank yous. And this is one of our boards. And we have 3 of these boards that are on the hallway that we constantly get really cool thank you letters. I mean, council member Good, one of your letters is up there. And it's just amazing to see this stuff come up on here. So I'm just saying, thanking the community, the council, all of our staff, the amazing support that we get here. It was a crazy year. It was hard going through the levy results, knowing we were 9 away from making that thing pass. But what it told me is an overwhelming support for our police agency. When you have 5,800 so people voting, when it was a lot of votes, and where we were close, and it really was touching to see that. So I've said my piece. Is there any questions from the council on tonight's presentation?
Colleagues, Deputy Mayor Furton.
And thank you, Chief, for your service and your staff. I mean, I echo former council member Cassover, and I can't believe how much you get done with, what little we can give you, with support we can give you.
Yeah.
I know that basically our community police academy stretches across boundaries. Patty Hale of Ridgecrest was one of the second cohort, and she just loved it. So I think you'll have a vocal supporter there of extending that into Shoreline. I did have one substantive question, which is, we've been working on HB 2015 on, and everybody thinks about the 10% sales tax, but of course that qualifies us for grants as well. And I'm wondering, are all our ducks in a row in terms of applying for those kind of grants?
The easy answer is yes. And I know that Commander Adams is very good at this kind of stuff. So when it's time, we will get there. This was submitted actually about 20 days ago or so. Ross and I worked on this, sent it off to CJTC for approval. They sent us back with about 8 items that we needed to take care of. That was done yesterday. And, or no, it was actually today. I finished it today. So everything is done. We are just looking for you're good to go. And then we'll be able to take it to you to do a resolution and say that it's good if you want to move forward. And then I think you may have to do it before July or something around there. There may be some rules there, but it actually wouldn't go into effect until January 1st. And then you would collect those taxes on April 1st when our finance director is seeing some money coming in. But it is done. We are right on what we need to do. And then the grant talk will come after we get this particular thing done. So,
Hey, thank you.
you're welcome.
Colleagues, Councilmember Good.
Well, Chief, I think that you can thank yourself for setting up the department and all of these unique programs and all of the great people. And even though we're going to be very sad to lose you, but you've set up the department to carry on with all of these wonderful ideas. And you started all of that. You got all of the processes rolling along with your staff that has gone along with you and supported it. So we are unfortunate for us, you won't be around, but fortunate for us, you set up the department so we will be able to continue to benefit from all of the work that you've done since you became chief.
Well, I want to
have one
say
more
thank you. And
question, too.
I want to respect what you said, but this is not me because I could bang my head against a lot of stuff
It's
trying to get
everyone.
things done. It's this group, and it's my officers and staff that gets it done. I can have all kinds of ideas and I can't get them done if I don't have everybody on the same page. So it's all because of my staff. That's where it comes down to. And it started with Sutton. Sutton was the one that basically said, let's do anything we can, no matter if we fail, let's get it done. And I was all on board for that and I haven't stopped since. So,
I got one more question.
yes, ma'am.
Did you fix the truck?
Yes, it got fixed. Yeah, there was an unfortunate incident at the Community Police Academy and we had some witnesses and we had to take some statements from somebody hitting a pole. I don't know if there's maybe still in here. They might be in here.
This still hasn't paid off on that yet. Yes, please.
And I want to echo what you're hearing a lot of. And I think one of the things is you drive the culture. You can't have a good culture among your department if you aren't being that culture through the whole time. So knowing that we have that here, and again, Sutton sort of laid the foundations and you've just taken it to a new place. I'm gonna really miss you.
Thanks.
And, but I think everything change is inevitable. And I'm happy for you as much as I can be. And I look forward to what this department does next and what great ideas they come up with.
Well, I'm going to say that what I want is all of my staff, especially the commanders, to hear what you said at the beginning there, that this culture, because it needs to continue. So,
Colleagues, other questions or comments? Chief, we're going to have more time to send positive vibes your
Thanks.
way. But it really is about the culture. You're very gracious to share the success with everyone, and what you've done is quite extraordinary, and you have set the team up for success. And that is, I think everyone who is in any position of leadership hopes that when they make the decision or don't make the decision, whatever the choice is, some of us, we get elected, so we don't get those decisions, but leave it in a better place than where we found it. And I have no doubt that that's where we are.
Yep.
And so I'll leave it there, but we have plenty more times to celebrate your
Thank you, Mayor.
successes.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, that concludes 2025, and then hopefully 2026 is even better. So thank you, Council.
Thank you, Chief. Colleagues, let's take a 5-minute recess. I was sitting in a car for 5 hours and I need to stretch my legs. I can't feel my toes.
Thank you. These seats are just mud.
It turns out Public Works has a part in that too. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I'm waiting, I'm delaying while I wait for my PowerPoint to come on. There it is. Excellent. All right. So I'm here tonight to talk to you about the local road safety plan. It's all about improving safety. It really is about that piece of the road safety that is part of the public works, part of the engineering, part of the design, safety by design kind of thing. What is a local road safety plan and why do we need it? It is a data-driven safety plan focused on local roads. It's not just a document, it's a strategy. It uses crash data and community input to prioritize actions that reduce serious injury and fatalities. We're going to identify high-risk locations and behaviors. We're going to recommend targeted, cost-effective safety improvements, and it's supported by state and federal transportation agencies. This is a big part of the key piece that they're looking for from communities. Why do we need a local road safety plan? We got lots of plans, right? It seems like, it does feel like we have lots of plans. We need a local road safety plan because it is really driven by data. This is the one that isn't about opinions or thoughts or anything like that. It is about what does the data show and where do we need to make improvements. Police just showed a great example of a car crash. And so they do all that in-depth investigation, but that doesn't stop there. Theirs is on the criminal path and all of that. Then it comes into my department and we do a similar kind of investigation, but now we're looking at why, how could it have been prevented? What made the difference here? So, we, even in a small city, slower speed limits, we still have preventable crashes. Some of these crashes, many of these crashes are preventable, and we have a part to play in that. So traffic crashes are the leading cause of injury and death. Local roads account for a large share of those. Growth and changing travel patterns increase risk,
and proactive planning saves lives and resources. This is going to help us act before problems get worse. You can see the little pull out I've done there. This is going to show us hotspots. And actually, it's funny because the PD showed a very similar map because we're all kind of working on that same data. So we can look at both the accidents just on our local roads and the ones that also include the state routes. We will be including the state routes because we will be making recommendations for those roads through the local road safety plan. Local road safety plan uses the safe system approach, integrating speed limits, engineering improvements, and effective and equitable enforcement can be a productive suite of strategies for local jurisdictions seeking to comprehensively address safety challenges and improve safety outcomes. An integrated approach is an important part of the safe system approach, which recognizes that one single element may not be sufficient to improve safety, and that a comprehensive approach is necessary to create redundancies that accommodate human mistakes. For example, reducing posted speed limits is an important and proven step towards lowering vehicle speeds, but on its own, it's not enough. Research shows that effective speed management works best when paired with complementary strategies like roadway design, traffic calming, signage, and enforcement. We can implement many of these tools directly. For an example would be a relatively low-cost design change, such as narrowing lane widths, can naturally slow drivers without increasing crash rates and are supported by national guidance from organizations like AASHTO and NACTO. Increasing the number of speed limit signs and adding real-time your speed feedback signs are also effective, as we've seen here, in reinforcing driver behavior. Internationally, countries like Netherlands use an integrated approach that aligns safe speeds with what drivers perceive as reasonable, adjusting the roadway environment when needed to support lower speeds. We're also seeing success locally. In Seattle, a combination of lowering speed limits and making targeted street improvements reduced crashes on Greenwood Avenue by 35%. The key takeaway is that speed limit reductions are most effective when they're part of a broad, coordinated strategy that aligns design, policy, and driver expectation. I kind of know I'm speaking to the choir here, but that is where we're headed, the safe system approach. What can a local road safety plan do for Lake Forest Park? One of the biggest benefits is funding. Having a local road safety plan makes the city more competitive for safety grants, but it also works towards our larger goal of long-term transportation planning and prioritization. Teaser, I will be following this up next month with a discussion about the transportation improvement plan. And how this fits into that. Maybe this allows us to put pressure on other agencies to make simple changes that to things like highway speed limits. Maybe, no promises. Common safety issues on local roadways. I think we all know these: speeding, distracted driving, pedestrian and bicycle safety gaps, limited lighting or visibility, and intersection conflicts. These are all pretty straightforward. And this table is something that I know people have seen before. This really talks about the field of vision based on speed. These are the kind of tools we use when we look at the data and decide what kind of treatment works in different areas. We're really trying to apply practical solutions. We might find an intersection or a corridor that has a lot more accidents than we would have anticipated for the road conditions. This happened in a different jurisdiction I was in, and it was a four-way stop intersection, and there was just so many accidents at this one intersection. We just, it didn't make any sense. So we put in some flashing stop signs there to try to just bring in you really need to stop here, because there was really no reason for people to be getting into those accidents. So we were trying to change driver awareness at that intersection. It's a great example of how we can do some small things, or how we discover things that we never really would have looked at that intersection if we hadn't looked closely at the data. We look at the data, it leads us to dig deeper and try to find new methods that might work for that particular area. Data-driven decision-making. This is an example of the data we pulled for the 5-year period from 2020 to 2024. It's always a little late, which is a little annoying because we go through 2024, even though it's 2026. And I do have the 2025 data. We're just in a little bit of a delay. So it always irritates me, and I always have to rethink about what the 5-year period is. But we will update this yearly. So that's part of why the local road safety plan is important, is we look back at it every year. You can see here, I have at the top, this is the data without the state routes, and then the data with the state routes. You can see that most of our accidents do happen on the state routes. Serious injuries on our local roads was 5 without the state routes, and then 13 with the state routes. And of course, the big glaring number on there is that there were 2 fatalities on our state routes within the last 5 years. During this process, we will review every serious injury accident, looking for ways to prevent and reduce incidents. An example scenario, if a motorist hit a person on a scooter and the motorist was going 40 miles per hour, given that same situation, if they were going 35, would they have had time to stop? Could we have saved someone? That's the kind of questions we will ask. And if the answer to that is yes, that gives us tools to put pressure on other municipalities that might not be listening to us when we're asking them to reduce the speed limit. Okay, I had a lot of fun making this slide. Community engagement and partners. So we have quite a few partners that we work with, King County Metro, WSDOT, obviously, and King County, as they help us out as well. And then our neighboring cities. We're not in the island, right? We're surrounded, and so we need to work in partnership with them. Over the past several years, the city has engaged in extensive outreach with both community members and partner organizations, gathering valuable input on key initiatives such as speed management, traffic calming, speed safety cameras, and healthy streets. The feedback consistently reflects a strong community desire for safer roads, lower speeds, and improved walking and biking facilities. The local road safety plan builds on this foundation of engagement and will continue to prioritize collaboration and community-informed strategies as we move forward. There's been a lot of work already on the outreach, and so I do not want to restart all of that. So we're going to charge ahead moving forward with this local road safety plan, and that will lead into the transportation improvement plan as well. But, we've heard the community. They want safer streets, they want slower speeds, and they want a better bike and ped pathways. This is just part of the toolkit that kind of goes along with the local road safety plan. This is put on by FHWA, Federal Highway Administration. And they basically look at the speed, the kind of road, and the different factors. And they give you some of the tools that are proven to work in that area. And then on the right-hand side, you can kind of see this is changeable variable speed sign on the right there, showing that it can reduce total crashes and 65% for rear end crashes and 51% for fatal and injury crashes. So, really shows that these are proven methods. And this is the toolkit. And this is just a piece of it, but it's all available on the Federal Highway Administration. And as we look at different intersections and as we look at that safety data, we'll actually look for recommendations through this toolkit. Funding opportunities. Having a plan in place is often required or strongly preferred when we're applying for funding. So that's one of the biggest reasons we're doing this. It's important so that we can be very competitive when we go out and go for grants for projects, for road projects, for safety improvement projects. It can really help us by supplementing our own dollars, and we use our dollars as a match to that agency funding. Implementation strategies. So part of how this works is we prioritize the project list. So we have a project list that comes out. Have been working with council actually on the prioritization schedule and how we'll be using that. We identify and rank safety projects based on data, risk, and potential impact to ensure we focus resources where they will do the most good. We can have short, medium, and long-term actions. So the plan will include phased approach. So we can look at like, is there something small and quick we could do in a location versus like this needs to be a big CIP, it's going to take a long time. And then everything in between. Measurable performance matrix is really important part of the plan. We will review the data year after year and see if we're making progress. Part of the requirement of the plan is to have goals that are based on the data, and they're based in fact findings. So we'll be utilizing those and going back to them year after year. And we will adjust them too. That's the other thing, is that, you know, if we start to reach a goal, then we make a stretch goal. If we see that we're not hitting a goal, we'll attempt to sort of refocus our efforts, try to figure out why that goal isn't being met and adjust our strategies. And then ongoing monitoring and update. I guess I just kind of talked about that one, but they kind of go together. What's the point? The ultimate goal is saving lives and improving the quality of life here in our city. I mean, that's it. This is a great tool. I find it very useful. I think that the heat maps like the PD showed earlier are extremely useful for our fact-finding portion of this plan. And like I said, you just keep going back to it every year and you keep looking and you start knocking things off and figuring out where the pain points are, focusing our projects there, and then seeing that reduction. One of those bullets I wanted to say also is the increased public confidence in transportation projects and planning. I want people to understand that we are working towards a goal. We're all a little impatient and we all kind of want it all now. And I understand that I'm a little impatient too, and would love to be able to provide it all now. But we don't have the funds and we don't have the resources to do that. So we have to get the plan on paper and then start ranking them and then working the plan. And that is what I want to show to the community that we're doing. And I think that is what the council has shown that they want as well. Okay. Next steps. Like I said, this was started before I got here. Transpo has already done quite a bit of the work on the data collection and analysis. So the next steps is to draft the plan. This is a little bit in a fast forward, trying to get this done and the transportation improvement plan in a quick manner. We need to get them done. We need to have them on the books so we can start moving forward. Remembering that all of these plans are living documents and we will update them year after year. So this program is, the next thing you're going to see is a draft plan. And it'll come to you and I'll want comments and input, but we will be moving forward with the draft plan next month. Okay, this is your favorite part. Questions, comments?
Thank you, Director Heaton. Colleagues, questions for Nova, please.
Yeah, I have a few, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Do you know if the variable speed limit signs can be used for like inclement weather, like if it's icy? Can we reduce the speed because of something like that?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I believe it is the case. I know they can do it. They do it on the state routes. So I suspect we would be able to do it on local roads as well.
Perfect. And then love the data collection. So maybe working with PD to find consistent trailer locations that we can replicate, at least at a minimum, the same ones every so often. I think it's a great tool. It gets us great counts and speeds and lots of the data that you're looking for. And then how do you handle underreported or like near misses? What is your approach to gathering better data around that?
That's a great question. That's a tough one. I think that my biggest tool is the fact that I have a PD here at the city that we're meeting with regularly. We're going to talk to those patrol officers and just really get their input and their feedback, because they see it, they know, they have that ability to give us some information. There's other, what they call big data out there as well, that we can pull some information from. That might not get us the near misses, but it does get us some more about the cut through traffic and different things like that. So there is that big data ability for us to pull from that as well, which is based on people's cell phones and like individual trips.
And then my last, does this plan come with like a draft map, or is it more just steps of how we can get better on each area?
It'll have both, because it has both strategies and then like actual projects. So it'll have both. And we will have definite projects, but the project can also be education, driver education, things like that. So it's one of the things that I like about this plan is it gives us the opportunity to sort of think outside of the box and how are we going to engage with the drivers. We have those changeable message signs that we use for construction or different things like that. We can put those out and remind people not to drink and drive, or we can put those out and remind people not to speed, or happy holidays, be safe, that kind of stuff. So I think that when we look at the data, we're going to see that people on their cell phones is a huge part of the problem. It's so frustrating that people just don't seem to get it, because we're all driving and we all love our cell phones and we're just like, oh, it's not me. I'm not the distracted driver on my cell phone. And yet they still have it on their hands. And so, trying to get that message through to people that it is what causes like half of the incidents in a small city like this is distracted driving. And almost all of those are on their cell phone. It could be the radio, could be their kids, but I think we know cell phones are the worst.
Deputy Mayor Fortani.
Thank you, Director Heaton, for kicking that off. As you say, it's been some time since we started it, and now it looks like we're going to actually get one, which is amazing. The question I have for you is the equity piece, and I'm wondering, is this the appropriate place to basically have criteria? The knock against City Council has always been that we fund things within sight of City Hall and not very much else. And so I'm thinking of roads like 55th Northeast, 30th Northeast in the northern part of the city, some of the Briarcrest streets, things like that. So parts of the city that don't really get necessarily much of our transportation dollars, will there be a piece to factor in that factor?
That portion comes through the traffic transportation improvement plan, the TIP. So that will have the equity piece in it. Local road safety planning really is data driven. So, but all of these feed into the transportation improvement plan.
Councilor Rosenau.
So following up on that, and we've talked about this before also, in the data, one of the things that's challenging, and as preface, I will say, what I like about this is I've tried to train myself to stop saying accidents and say crashes, because for these purposes, it is getting at those underlying causes and trying to get out ahead of things so that the crash doesn't happen in the first place, and recognizing that even something that to the driver seems like an accident, there was a cause and we can address it on a policy level. One of the things that I imagine is harder, I'm wondering how you're going to handle this, is the avoided trips, especially for pedestrians and cyclists, but also for drivers. I mean, I know people who don't drive down across on 40th over the hill because they don't want to have to come onto Ballinger at that weird intersection where the roundabout is coming in. So there are just those avoided trips because there is a perception, at least, of a safety concern at a spot. And So there's not a safety signal necessarily. There's not the collision because people are avoiding it perhaps. But there is, right or wrongly, a perception that it is an unsafe spot. And so you don't get the bikes coming through. You don't let your kids ride along a particular route or at all. So is there a way to capture that into this that is still data driven, but that does get ahead of those and move people safely along those routes that they want to use?
There is, but this isn't exactly the piece for it. Local road safety plan really, again, very data driven, but it's only one piece in our transportation improvement plan. What we'll see getting more at what you're getting at will be in the healthy streets and in the traffic calming. As we work towards our neighborhoods and we look at the neighborhoods, the thing about working in a small city is we can look at every single road in our neighborhood and we can come up with a plan for every single road in our neighborhood. Now, I can't build it right away for every single neighborhood, right? But at least I can plan it and then we can prioritize it. And that's where that equity piece comes in. And that's where that we decide, low hanging fruit. Is it cheap? Can we do something easy? That kind of stuff. And then we start to look at things like how close are the parks? How close are the schools? And we give extra credit for those projects. So we're really working towards, because everybody wants their street done first. And I totally understand that, but we need some sort of way to kind of filter out the information. But what I'm not afraid to do is put all the projects down on paper and just say, listen to the people. People have great ideas on what should or shouldn't happen in their communities. I want to listen to the people. I want to think it through, do an engineering analysis on it, whatever I need to do to create those projects. So I think that the biggest thing I can say is I want to hear from you. I want to know what people think, what they want. I can't always give them what they want, and I definitely can't promise it's going to happen fast. But we can use it, we can plan for it, we can consider it, and we can really start to think about what different roads need where. And that truly piece is that complete streets piece.
Two other hopefully easy questions. I know the Planning Commission has teed up a PSRC. Director Hoffman knows what it is. I assume you two have talked about it, and that are these related projects? Is it the transportation element updates to the comp plan? Is that connected to this, or are those separate paths?
Yeah, I will be extremely closely working with him when it comes to the transportation piece. That's a big part of my job. So we'll be working closely together. We have had very little interaction so far, actually. You would be surprised at how busy both he and I have been since I started this job. And we've had very little time to actually sit down. But yeah, we will be very heavily coordinating. And that is a task I've done before. I worked very closely with my last planning director as we moved through our comprehensive plan to get that done. So it's super important that Public Works be there, they be actively involved, and they be helping.
And then the other one was just earlier today, Chief Harden mentioned the concern about increased collisions with a new roundabout coming in. I'm assuming that you've talked about that and are thinking about ways to have less of that.
I think
there are things that we should be doing.
I think that it's a great idea to try to do some outreach to the community prior to having that roundabout go online. I absolutely echo what the chief said. We should definitely expect some increased, I'm going to call them fender benders, because that's generally what they are. The difference between an intersection like that and a roundabout is a roundabout, you are forced to slow due to the curves bringing you into that intersection. And an unmarked intersection like it is right now, people are going really fast through there. So the severity of an accident that happens in that intersection now would be much higher than the severity of an accident that would happen in a roundabout. And so that sometimes can be sort of what we need to tell the community when they're upset when it first goes online. And there are some fender benders that happen, is that we're protecting lives by placing this in here, and let's do some education and some outreach to try to teach people how to drive in a roundabout, because it is a skill. And I think as we get older, it gets harder for us to get those skills. But I do think they're sort of everywhere. I was surprised this was our first, actually, because there's quite a few as you go north. The two that were just put in Lake Stevens, those two had huge growing pains, and heard a lot about of negativity around those. But at the same time, they were so much more efficient at moving traffic through that on Highway 9 through that segment, and 204. And again, there were a lot of fender benders, but not high injury accidents.
Councilmember Golden.
Thanks. I'm very intrigued by this. From the data you showed, it seemed that roughly 2/3 of collisions in the city are on our two state highways. And if I was introspecting honestly, I think we've had fairly little success getting WashDOT to adopt traffic calming measures on those two highways. So I was wondering if you could comment on how this plan how we could leverage this plan to more effectively work with WashDOT.
I think that what we will see is we will have some strategies that are presented in our local road safety plan, which is a document that the state supports. And part of that could be perhaps reducing the speed limit on SR 522, for example. And then that might help get some traction on that. I have other ideas for how we get some even better traffic calming on our state routes. But I need to work on them more before I present them and get everybody all excited. But I have a lot of ideas about how we can improve that situation. I also do want to say that the ADT on those roads is so much higher than our other roads. And so we do have to take that into consideration, that any higher ADT road is going to, of course, have higher collisions because there's just more cars on it. Just to be fair to them.
Other questions for Director Hayden's first touch on this? I'm sorry, yes, Councilmember Muhlenberg.
Yeah, Councilmember Rosno and Goldman touched on this in their questions, but maybe more direct. How does Healthy Streets fit in with this, or Safe Streets for All? I know we advanced one of those programs last year or 2 years ago through the council. When I was out canvassing the neighborhood, I heard a lot from neighbors who wanted to take advantage of those programs and put obstructions on their road and try to cut down on some of that cut through traffic. Not data driven in the same way, clearly, but maybe some of the phone data that you talked about helps to inform that. One neighborhood that we hear from consistently, the 186 neighborhood, that one actually does have a lot of accidents on those roads. So it looks to me like that may pop to the top as a prioritization. But every one of the entry roads into our city has a lot of cut through traffic on it. And while there aren't a lot of collisions on those roads, there's a lot of high speed traffic that goes through on those roads. So where does Healthy Streets fit in, and how do we get that prioritized so our community can actually start taking advantage of that program that we've moved forward?
So Healthy Streets is a little bit different animal, except as you pointed out, where we see quite a few collisions, and then this will actually support that moving forward with the Healthy Street on those routes, so that this can help support that. But Healthy Streets is a little bit its own beast, and I like the way the program has been set up to be driven by the communities. And to get the community buy-in before we start moving forward. What's holding that project up a little bit right now is really just people, a lack of people. I have one request in right now for a Healthy Street. It will be my template. As we try it out, we've got some signs. We're gonna think through how we make this work. There's a lot of sort of small housekeeping items that go along with that. For example, one of the things when we think about healthy streets, a lot of people think about like planters or something like that, that sort of slows it down and has the signage sort of incorporated. One of the things I'll be asking the community to do is to take ownership of whatever we put out there, as in like they're going to want to plant plants in it and make it beautiful, right? Which is great, but the city can't take on the responsibility of maintaining that. So this is just an example of some of the little details we'll need to work out as we move this healthy streets forward. But it is moving forward. We do have it on our sites. We're just trying to knock off some high priority things like the transportation improvement plan before we kick it into high gear.
Thank you. Colleagues, questions for Director Heaton? Well, you survived your first presentation. Congratulations. Well done.
Thank you.
They were not as ornery as usual, but we'll get them wound up next time. But thank you so much. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate the presentation. And Director Hoffman is up. Resolution number 2070, authorizing the mayor to sign amendment number 2 to AG 24026 with Facet for the Phase 2 Lakefront improvements for design, engineering, environmental review, and permitting project. Director Hoffman.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Mark Hoffman, Community Development Director, for the record. Just a little bit of background, because you're very aware of this project. In 2021, the city acquired 2 parcels next to the preserve, and with the intent of public access to the shoreline, Lake Washington. In June of 2024, a design contract was entered into with Facet to provide technical skill for design that is not currently employed by the city. So that contract is ongoing. In October, we received a SEPA appeal of the responsible official's determination of, or mitigated determination of non-significance. Because of the holidays, that was not able to be heard. It was grouped with the 4 permit applications, went to the hearing examiner. That started in late February, went into March, 9 hearing dates in total. And from my memory, it was a month of hard work. I can report that the SEPA appeal was denied. The 4 other permits were remanded to the city. And then we had an option of reconsideration. City Attorney Pratt wrote a great reconsideration, and 1 section was modified, and now the remand is before staff. That's likely the extent of what I can talk about in that regard. So tonight, the resolution proposed is to amend the contract, the second amendment, to accommodate the resources needed for that hearing to date in the amount of just over 93,000. So the amendment is to add task 7 and increase the not to exceed amount for the portion that's in your cover sheet. In preparation for tonight, I always print paper and come up and act like I memorized everything. I have to apologize. I realize attachment 3 and 4 are not in your packet, or at least not in the packet I printed. Attachment 3 is amendment 1. Attachment 4 is the actual agreement. There are council members that weren't here 2 years ago. So we will get those to you. I can tell you that amendment 1 was an extension, simple amendment to change January 2026 to December 2026. But we wanted to include the original agreement so that you can have the context and background. And so in proposing to add task 7 and 7A to the scope and increase the not to exceed, that would bring us current. The rest of the contract would run. We do not know exactly where we're going to go from here. It's a hearing examiner decision. And so that's to be determined, but I can field questions. We let Corey escape to a conference, so she's not here tonight. This is just introduction, and we will come back before you in May. But if you have any questions that we could work on or that I can't answer tonight, we will record those and get back to you. Thank you.
Colleagues, questions for Director Hoffman, and we have Attorney Pratt here to make sure we stay within the guardrails, because this is delicate, as it were. Yes, please.
Thank you. So the dollar amount we have in here is for work already performed. Is it anticipating any further work as we continue this process?
It does not anticipate the unknown that's not already contained in the contract. So it has dollar amounts that are unspent, but this would just bring it current for the hearing work. There may be other need.
I suspected as much as it goes down to the penny. So
Yeah. And as you see in the, I believe in the cover sheet, budget amendment will be needed for 3 primary reasons. The hearing expenses for the consultant, great work by the city attorney, and the work by the hearing examiner. So there are some unknowns.
Administrator Hill.
You let him go long enough, he kind of stole my thunder, but the budget amendment the Director Vaughn will be bringing to you in May will anticipate what those costs look like. So we will bring that forward to you, just trying to project into the future. I mean, today we know the $93,000+ for Facet. We have about $74,000 to date in city attorney fees. And we do not understand the breadth of what the cost of the hearing examiner are. So there will be some assumptions made, but not knowing next steps for this process, they're assumptions.
So we will likely have another consultant amendment once that process is done and we know what those numbers are for the remainder of the work that Facet will be
Certainly if
doing.
needed, yeah,
Yeah.
it's just hard to speak to.
Yeah, we just can't do it yet.
Deputy Mayor Furtoni.
I wanted to assure Director Hoffman that in fact, in the most recent version of the packet, attachments 3 and 4 are in there, which are the original and
that's-
the amendment 1.
Right, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the question I actually had for you was a little bit different, which is this, and this might be a Director Vaughn question, is this money going to be coming out of the general fund?
Yes, that is general fund dollars.
Okay, thank you.
I guess
Colleague.
just to
Councilmember
follow up
Rosen.
on the question that Councilmember Riddle was asking, in May, would we have more clarity on, would this be further tweaked with any new information by a second reading, or
Not-
is this?
Not
it's
this
gonna be-
amendment,
okay.
no, this really brings it current and they are costs incurred. So this amendment captures that and allows invoicing. But we will have likely more information on other unknowns.
Councilmember Riddle.
Just to clarify with the sort of invoicing sort of periods, there's no time constraints for us to be able to approve this at this time.
Tonight, certainly not. In May, we will be invoiced as terms of the contract. And it's likely that we would ask to waive 3 readings during the first week or first meeting of May. But certainly not before.
Okay, thank you
Not
for that.
critical in April.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, colleagues, any other questions? Thank you, Director Hoffman.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. We are moving on to Administrator Hill is going to introduce the program executive LTE position.
Thank you, Mayor. Evening,
Please.
council. I'm going to start by amending the executive summary in here. I suggest that the administration is asking for this to be approved for 2 years, remainder of 26, well, and then through 27. I'm going to amend that to say, when this comes back to you, we'll only be asking through 26. But just understanding that as we do the 27-28 biennial budget, there will be a request in there for that to go at least 1, if not both years of that biennium as well. So just a little background on how this came to be, with the unforeseen need for Director Dickinson to move to a basically 98% remote position. This gave us the opportunity to go out and hired the wonderful Public Works Director that you just heard from, and then pivot and bring Director Dickinson in, what is proposed as a program executive position to keep a bunch of these capital projects moving forward. As you heard from Director Heaton, the amount of work that she has on her plate, if we couldn't look at something like this, several of the projects that I have listed in this agenda cover, we would be looking to put on hold. Now, the job description that's attached doesn't, while it captures the unique duties of the position and the coordination with the departments, and it does rely on the two project managers that are the employees that report to Director Heaton. Rebecca would be, or this position would be utilizing those two individuals as well as a lot of the leadership team. It will not have a supervisory role in any capacity. The way that is structured is it reports to the city administrator and then coordinates with department directors as needed to get the work done. As I put in the agenda cover, the projects that we've outlined for this are the roundabout project, continued coordination of the culvert project that WashDOT did on SR 104. So, you know, they've got a sewer project to finish up. The Public Works material bin project. We keep that on just so the mayor can continue to have his jokes about it. The City Hall facilities study, as you remember, we had dollars allocated towards EV chargers at City Hall. As Director Dickinson came on board with her expertise, recognized the fact that there were a lot of gaps that were missed previously and with our consultants. So brought that back to council and then was directed to use those dollars that were allocated to do the city facilities study. What do we need for EV chargers? What do we need for City Hall to run when the power's out and not have the generator shooting sparks out of the plugs at staff as we were trying to work and freezing at the same time? Current facilities project, this is anything prior to the transition out as the Public Works Director. The lift station project is at 30% design. Now I'm getting a consultant to take us 100% design. And then Sound Transit is basically the O&M agreements for the walls along 522 that Director Dickinson and I have been knee deep in for years. And so that putting all that together, that is what we would craft. And with those timelines, that's probably somewhere well into 2028 to get all these wrapped up. And then as I've included in the fiscal and policy implications, the difference between the program executive and the Public Works Director, you can see the cost allocations. And I can tell you that within the program executive, the 10% of facilities, that is the only hit to the general fund. The rest are paid by ratepayer fund. So it's not a large impact on the general fund. And it is considered a limited term employee. So it will require that each biennium, for as long as council and administration determine this is necessary, will require that council approve it for the upcoming biennium. And you are not asked to take action on this tonight. This is just introductory. But any questions you might have that I can bring back for you next time.
Colleagues, questions for Administrator Hill? I would say just from perspective of the administration, we do have a lot of projects going on that are getting close to either breaking down or being completed, and we need to carry through right now. The institutional expertise that Ms. Dickinson brings to the table, having been with us for quite a while, is essentially getting these things across the line. The alternative would be, as Administrator Hill said, either tabling a couple of them or at great expense hiring different consultants and bringing them up to speed at probably on our nickel. So I just want to throw that in there. I think this is a good alternative. It's not ever easy to swallow the question of additional expense, but the hit to the general fund is smaller than one would expect. Every hit is not insignificant right now. Deputy Mayor Tony.
So yeah, thanks for the update on this. And I think we're fortunate to have two such talented individuals working for us simultaneously, and especially, as the mayor said, at a relatively low cost to the general fund. I'm guessing it's going to be something around 5 figures, and we'll probably see it as a budget amendment when the larger budget amendment resolution comes forth.
Yeah, this would have to come through that budget amendment. And actually it will require maybe by ordinance to add the position. Kim's looking at me. I don't know if it's ordinance or resolution.
Yeah, that's
But
correct.
we will need to do that to add that limited term employee position. And it will be identified as such within the structure of the employees. It will be listed as LTE.
Councilmember Golden.
Yes, so a budget question. I believe, is it the surface water fund that there's one fund that kind of is getting a bit of a bailout from the general fund?
I think that's the street fund,
Oh.
isn't it? Yeah, that's the street fund in the future.
Okay, and that actually, because this executive is not
You're
being
open
funded
back.
from the street fund, so there would not be that indirect hit to the general
Correct.
fund then.
Correct.
Good question. Thank you, Larry.
And you'll see the 35% to the traffic safety fund. That's looking at, with the roundabout is a large bulk of the work that's being done by that position. So that it translates back to the 002 fund, traffic safety.
Colleagues, any other questions for Administrator Hill? We'll be bringing this back for further consideration and more details in the future.
And I as well, probably in the May meeting, since we're several weeks from that, would like to, if there aren't any big concerns, look at waiving the 3-touch rule and getting this in place, just so we can make it official.
So as a point of order, the way we amended our governance manual is if we want something to be on the consent agenda for the second touch, we would adopt that motion tonight.
And I don't know that it needs, I wouldn't recommend the consent agenda just because of the
nature of it.
the mechanics of creating the position and bringing it in. I would do it just as a regular, bring it back to you, present everything to you again, have that discussion. And then if you are willing to waive the 3-touch rule to take action that evening. I don't think with what we still need to bring before you to create the position within the budget, that consent makes a lot of sense.
Colleagues, any other questions for Administrator Hill? Okay. Thank you very much, Phil.
Thank you.
Appreciate that very much. Let's see, moving on, hello, we're at council member reports. Anyone, council member, council committee reports? Yes.
I've got a
Councilman
few,
Gilbert.
Parks and Rec Advisory Board met a couple weeks ago. Fun project. We had the Shoreline Historical Museum there with a whole lot of photos and some books about the city and a bunch of printed pamphlets that they found. They left a bunch of those copies behind with us, so we all took a copy home with us. Anyhow, looking for photos of the Gates property from back in the day, and just a general call to people in the city if they have those types of images to provide them. But we're getting a lot of content coming from the historical museum, and a fun project. Nominated photos were due from the committee on Friday, I guess tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. And there's a special meeting of the Parks and Rec Board that's been noticed that happens on the 30th of April. So the topic will be those images. I also want to comment on the Blue Heron Park restoration. I don't know if anybody's been over to visit that park recently, but what a tremendous change in the period of 4 or 5 months that crew has been working on it. I was able to make it this last session, spent half the day with them before going to sample water with the Saunders crew and all of that. But 19 volunteers showed up. 5 of those were high school students from Shorecrest that came out to help with that park project. A couple of those high school students drug their parents along, so we got some adult labor out of it as well. It was a grueling day. We were trying to take rebar out of the ground, and we spent 2 hours getting one pole out with a 200-pound teenager from the high school hanging on the extractor to make it happen. We decided to pound the rest of them deep down into the ground and bury them. So they're still all in there somewhere, and we had to go buy some new rebar, but just amazing transformation that's happening. Everybody should go check it out. And then the last thing I want to comment on is on Sunday, I think it's May 3rd, Sunday, May 3rd. That sounds right. Constitution reading happening at Third Place Commons. Chief, you signed up for it. That's great. We're up to 67 people who have signed up to be a reader at that event. There's 100 reading slots, so there's still room for people to sign up. But it looks like it's going to be a great event starting at I think it's 3 to 5 p.m. So I hope you're all there. May 3rd.
Put on the file here. Councilmember Golden.
Yep, the Regional Transit Committee met earlier this week. We had an update from various agencies on FIFA preparations for the World Cup from both transit and transportation agencies. A couple of high-level ones. If you are planning to be downtown during the World Cup, you really should take transit. They're basically going to be blocking off a whole bunch of roads around international districts, stadium neighborhoods, and no cars allowed. Bright side for us up here, they're going to be pausing the Revive I-5 project for the duration of the World Cup.
Interesting. Councilmember Rosenau.
Planning Commission met on the 14th, I believe. Elected a new chair. So Commissioner Cluino is now the chair, and the vice chair remains Yannick Haji. And they set up they're continuing they got their approved plan back from us, so are digging in on that. Director Hoffman sort of walked them through some of the concepts for the revisions of the critical areas ordinance, and looks like there will be set up a briefing with one of the staff members who will run them through what it looks like to actually review a project under the existing critical areas ordinance, and be ready to then make any necessary amendments from there to comply with new state laws. And they're working away, getting their ideas together on what affordability projects will look like out of the Planning Commission. And so if there is feedback that anyone would like me to pass along to them, we certainly can, but I think they feel right now like they've got a goal and a path forward, and we'll see where that goes. And if eventually it'll come to us, and then we get a crack at it too.
Thank you for Tony.
Okay, a couple of quick items. One of them is that K4C Elected Outreach Committee is back. Our contact is Cassie Byerly of Government Relations in the Executive's Office of the county. So that expect that group to basically start getting back into gear. Second thing is I've been invited to go to the Washington Collaborative Elected Leaders Institute. This is teams of 2 to 4 local council members. So I'm going with Ted Weinberg of Mercer Island and Sun Beerford of Sammamish. And you're supposed to propose 2 to 4 projects that the cities have common in terms of wanting a solution. So we've picked EV chargers, affordability, and we're looking for a couple more topics. So if anybody's interested in suggesting something to me to take there, the purpose of this institute is to come up with sort of ideas for joint grants or other kinds of projects that cities can collaborate on, and of course, basically get some kind of economy of scale out of it.
Very cool. Alex, any other council member reports or committee reports or city administrator's report is in the mix there. I just got back from 4 days in the mountains with my daughter. It's her spring break. Had wonderful weather. It was marmots, deer, nesting ospreys, no bears. We were expecting this. We usually see a bear about this time of year, but not this time. I attended the Sound Cities Association board meeting last week down in Renton. Very productive meeting with that group. Suffice it to say, many municipalities are having challenges with subcontractors for telecommunication companies, people pulling fiber optics and things like that, to the point where some of the cities are having to literally, as we did, supervise their work, which is ridiculous. So we're going to need some regulatory relief and direction on that, because they're running roughshod over everyone. Another slightly, there was a lot of conversation about a variety of topics. Everyone is very enthusiastic about what's happening with the World Cup. The coordination there is outstanding. particularly when it comes to transit. So we heard a little bit about that at the Seashore Forum as well over the past few months. And looking forward to continuing to work with the Sound Cities Board. As we've indicated before, there's one city that has left Sound Cities, which is unfortunate. We're hoping that, I sincerely hope they will consider coming back at some point. On a sadder note, I guess you may have heard the news today at about 3 o'clock. King County Regional Homelessness Authority is there's talk about having Councilmember Dembowski and one of his colleagues are going to introduce a resolution tomorrow to dissolve it. And the audit came back very troubling. I know the county executive as well as Seattle's Mayor Katie are very, very frustrated about the outcome. And so Councilmember Dembowski is going to be introducing a resolution tomorrow to disband it. We'll see where that goes. If you listen to his comments on the news today, I think he made some very appropriate remarks regarding the veracity and the future of the organization, and something has to change. We all know that. And I hopefully this does not result in services falling through the cracks for people that desperately need it. This just may not be the vehicle for it moving forward. And I applaud Councilmember Dembowski for being very brave and very forward-thinking about this discussion, because it's very important to bring it to the table. I did attend with the Scouts, the Scout troop last week. We pulled out a whole lot of ivy at Grace Cole Park, and to the tune of, at least a dump truck full. We got some pretty fun pictures of the 6, 7, 8. I think the oldest was 11. So, and our good friend, Mr. Jim Mead, who was our host there, was up at the top of the slope. And when I was taking a load of ivy down the hillside, we were way at the top on the shoreline border, apparently Mr. Mead did a slide all the way down the hillside. And very good naturedly told the kids, this is how you should try to stop yourself as you're falling down a hill, but not so successful. They checked him out. There was people with medical training on site, so he was fine. But learning experiences always with Jim, and he was a gracious host to help out up there. We're going to be getting some additional beaver fencing up there, and some posts, some other things as well, to make sure that the beavers, are 6 of them apparently that they've counted so far, and the pond level continues to vary depending on their engineering prowess, as it were. Great nature's engineers. I don't have anything else. Mr. Hill, did you have anything you wanted to highlight in the administrator's report?
Nothing in the administrator's report, but a few things to add. The resident comments and contact information from tonight, the clerk will be forwarding those to the appropriate directors so they can follow up with those residents. So as we've always done in the past, we do follow up, and sometimes council members follow up, but we will be following up on those comments from tonight. Climate coordinator position has been filled. I signed the paperwork today, so we'll have a start in May. Looks like it's a kind of a ramp up to full time. So obviously some other commitments, but so Director Hoffman can bring you some details on that in the future. And then last thing I have, when money's going out the window, more money needs to go out the window. Just to keep you up to speed, the public defense contract, you'll remember we adopted an amendment to that last year, brought on by the changes of the state Supreme Court. Just finished out the first quarter, and caseload is trending higher than we anticipated, which means costs are trending higher. We will keep an eye on that, but if it were to keep going like this, we'd be about $30,000 over budget by the end of the year. So we'll see how those cases trend, but so far for the first quarter, it's more than even the attorneys had anticipated. So I've noticed their lists are just getting longer. They list every case that they do every month. We normally were in the 16, less than 20 cases. We're in the mid-20s to almost 30 cases a month. So What that points to is there are more people needing public defense, can't afford attorneys than we've had in the past. So might be a sign of the economic times.
Great, thank you.
And with that, I'm done.
Colleagues, anything else for the good of the order?
Is there a tree walk this weekend?
Yes,
Yes.
Saturday at 10:30, meeting here at City Hall.
Okay.
Headed over towards the
Arbor Day.
reserve.
Yeah. Great, thanks for the reminder. Any
And the
other
report
events
notes
that were missed?
the report here also reminds us the farmer's market's opening, Pack the Park,
Yeah.
all the rest of that.
Yeah.
Good fun times.
Yeah, you bet. Great. Well, thank you, everybody. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Thanks, Kim. Bye.
And get our